He was born without spiritual veins and was treated like trash by his own family. Shen Xiang had no talent for cultivation until everything changes when he encounters two mysterious women, a goddess and a demon. After that, he awakens divine veins, gains absurd techniques, and acquires completely broken alchemy knowledge. Now he refines legendary pills like it's nothing, humiliates arrogant geniuses, and evolves at an insane speed. And the best part? He does all of this while dominating the cultivation world in the most overpowered way possible. And without further delay, let's get into the video because this one is insane. At the Shen family mansion, a young man was training, giving everything he had to achieve the best performance. He was Shen Xiang. Suddenly, another person arrived with two companions, applauding the protagonist and saying that he really was very strong, since he had managed to break the trunk with only a few punches. He was Shen Zhenhua. The other two laughed, saying that was exactly right and that, from the looks of it, the Shen family's hope was in Xiang's hands. The protagonist asked what Zhenhua wanted there. Zhenhua pointed out that the master wanted to ask the protagonist not to embarrass the family at the martial arts training field. With a simple movement of his hands, he released a burst of energy, destroying the trunks in front of him, and asked if the protagonist was trying to attack those trunks just to make others laugh. The other two kept flattering him, saying that Zhenhua really was very strong and that the chi of the 4th level of the martial realm was incredible. Zhenhua continued saying that apparently the protagonist still had not understood, because even if he gave his all by practicing every day until his hands bled, it would all be useless if he did not have at least one spiritual vein. The other two kept laughing, saying that he should just hide. Xiang began to get irritated, and Zhenhua said that he was trash just like his own father. The protagonist asked if he had the courage to say that again. Zhenhua continued mocking him, asking if he was wrong, because with the strength of the protagonist's father, Shen Tianhu, he could definitely compete for the position of patriarch. But unfortunately, because of the protagonist, he did not even have the qualifications to participate. Besides, he was already old and could only live to feed trash like Xiang, and that was truly pitiful. The protagonist lost control and tried to land a punch, asking if Zhenhua really wanted to start a fight. Zhenhua dodged the punch, but realized that Xiang had managed to make him bleed just by grazing him. He quickly backed away and shouted that now the protagonist had truly enraged him, and because of that, he would pay with his life. Zhenhua advanced and Xiang began analyzing the situation, thinking that he was only at the 4th level of the mortal martial realm and usually relied on chi, since he was truly lazy when it came to practice. But if it was only physical combat, there might actually be a considerable chance of victory. Xiang did not hesitate and also joined the fight. Xiang dodged the attack, and Zhenhua became a little confused, asking how that piece of trash could be so agile. The protagonist realized that this was his chance and landed a direct punch to Zhenhua's stomach. The other two were surprised, asking if the protagonist had really defeated the family genius using only physical strength. But Zhenhua began using chi and struck with an extremely powerful blow, causing a huge explosion inside that arena and making the protagonist almost lose consciousness. Zhenhua thought that he had nearly been defeated by that trash and, because of that, needed to show who the true protagonist of the family was. One of the men with him noticed Zhenhua's movement and said that, from the looks of it, he had reached the 5th level of the mortal martial realm. Zhenhua said that was exactly right because he had just advanced, and it seemed everything had worked out very well. He lifted Xiang by the hair, saying that, from the looks of it, he had tried to use his cleverness in physical combat to launch a surprise attack, but now he could do nothing. He struck Xiang again, making him bleed even more, and threw him away. He prepared to deliver the final blow, telling that trash to die. He attacked and caused another explosion. But as soon as the dust settled, he became a little annoyed because Shen Tianhu had stepped in front of the attack. He pretended to be happy, telling his uncle that he was a good cultivator since he had even managed to block the attack. But Shen Tianhu only ordered him to leave immediately. Zhenhua was surprised but decided to obey, saying that it would not be long until the competition for the position of a family head and that they only needed to wait and see whether his father would succeed. The protagonist, who was almost losing consciousness, apologized to his father, saying that he was a burden. Tianhu held his son in his arms, saying that the path of martial arts was not for everyone. Ordinary people had their own ways of living, so the protagonist did not need to be bothered by that. However, the Shen family did not accept mortals. A short time later, inside his room, he heard someone calling him from outside. After hearing the voice, he realized it was Xian. She went to the protagonist's father and said that she had already come there several times, but the protagonist refused to see her and asked if he was gravely injured. Tianhu asked her to return home because Xiang would not see her. Xian became upset and a little confused, asking why all of this was happening, since she was the protagonist's fiancé Tianhu said that they needed to end that engagement that day. Xianxian questioned what he meant by that. Tianhu said that she was the treasure of the Zhua family and also a genius in martial arts, but Jiang did not have a spiritual vein and was destined to be immortal for his entire life. For that reason, he did not deserve to be with her. Xiang felt even more like a complete failure after hearing all of that from his own father's mouth. Xianxian insisted, saying that it did not matter whether the protagonist was worthy or not because they loved each other and that was enough for her. But Xiang told her that marriage decisions were settled by the parents, so she needed to leave now. As soon as she left, he remained silent, thinking that he had to become stronger, and that to achieve that, even if he had to challenge everything and everyone, he would not hesitate for even a single second. He needed to fight for Xianxian and for his father, not only for himself. He was looking at a book called Infernal Spiritual Grass, a 1,000-year-old spiritual herb that, when refined into a pill, could help strengthen the spiritual energy of one's own body. In the mortal land at the immortal Devil Cliff, heavy rain and lightning cut through the sky. But that was not enough to stop the protagonist. He was climbing that cliff with all his strength and finally managed to reach his true objective. He spotted the infernal spiritual grass which grew once every 1,000 years. It could only be collected on the yin day of the yin month in the yin year. If he missed that opportunity, he did not know how many more years he would have to wait and suffer. If he could refine it into a pill, even without a spiritual vein, he could advance to the 5th level in an instant. He managed to grab the plant and said that it was time to change his fate. But suddenly, lightning struck the mountain, creating a small landslide. He began to fall, thinking that all his effort had been for nothing, and wondering how he could lose everything like that. He managed to hold onto the side of the cliff, but some rocks struck his body, making him fall again. He thought that he needed to endure just a little longer, because he no longer wanted to be trash. Then, afterward, he slowly opened his eyes and was surprised, asking if he had died because there were 2 women in front of him. One of the women smiled and said that if he did not get up immediately, she would leave him to die. The 2 were sitting on a rock and the protagonist stood up, a little confused. He explained the situation, saying his name and that he had been there trying to collect some herbs at the top of the mountain, but it began to collapse, so he fell there. He emphasized that it had not been his intention to offend the 2 of them. One of them took a deep breath, a little annoyed, saying that she had finally thought someone had come there to save them, but the result was a brat without a spiritual vein. However, she pointed out that it was fine, because when they died, someone would certainly build a grave for them. Xiang, still not understanding absolutely anything, called her senior and asked why she was saying that. The girl became angry and told the protagonist to call her sister. She explained that death chi surrounded that immortal devil cliff, and someone with a strong body and true chi was needed to leave that place. Besides, the 2 of them had been injured at the bottom of that cliff for quite some time, and she asked if he now understood the situation. Xiang took out a small bag and said that he had some spiritual herbs from his family. But the girl, who was trembling in pain, explained that something like that could not be treated with ordinary spiritual herbs, not to mention that they would be buried there sooner or later, so there was no need to try to heal the injuries. But the protagonist held her hand, asking how she would know that if she did not try to do something. Confidently, he shouted, saying that he still had very important matters to resolve, so he believed that she also had a reason to keep living. So even if he had to bet everything, he would do it without hesitation. The white-haired girl was surprised after that declaration and told her companion that maybe that brat really could understand something. The black-haired woman began lowering her clothes a little. The protagonist became embarrassed, saying that men and women should not be like that before marriage, emphasizing that it was very inappropriate for him to do that kind of thing. The other girl explained that the 2 of them were seriously injured, so they needed his help to apply the medicine. Even embarrassed by that situation, he decided to help and apologized for what he was about to do. But judging by the girl's expression, she seemed to be enjoying it quite a bit. The girl began releasing her abilities while thinking that before her martial skills, all men had revealed their true nature. Because of that, the protagonist would probably also give in to his instincts and show just how disgusting he truly was. Xiang began to be affected by that ability. He slowly started touching her back, but then realized that something was wrong and asked himself what he was doing. After realizing it, he pulled his hand away from her back and knelt down, asking forgiveness for what he had just done, because he felt that he had been losing control because of something, and for that reason, he was truly sorry. The white-haired girl smiled and said that she would tell him the truth. She introduced herself, saying that her name was Su Meiyao, the goddess of the 9th heaven, and that the woman he had been applying medicine to was her senior sister, Bai Yu, the witch of the 9th hell. The protagonist was surprised to see the goddess of the 9th heaven and the witch of the 9th hell. Meiyao laughed and told her sister that maybe that boy really was good. Yu agreed, saying that he had a very strong will and a good personality. Meiyao asked the protagonist to come closer and congratulated him for passing the test. Xiang approached and was surprised to hear that it had only been a test. Ma Yao explained that they had been attacked by a personal enemy and had been gravely injured. Now, they were unable to move properly and had even lost their previous strength. Besides, formidable demonic beasts roamed that place, so they needed to leave immediately. Xiang asked what the plan was, because he would help however he could. Yu said that she would gift the protagonist with the extreme yin and extreme yang of the two of them. If he could refine them, he would be able to break through the mortal chi of the immortal devil cliff and escape. Ma Yao pointed out that he should know that, with their personalities, they would not give their veins to someone with a bad character. That was why Yu had used her powers to test him. The protagonist, still surprised by all of that, asked if this really meant that he had passed the test. Yu told him not to get excited so quickly because the fusion and refinement of divine veins was not something ordinary people could endure, and if he could not overcome it, his life would come to a tragic end. For that reason, she wanted to emphasize that he should think about it very carefully since he could refuse. But in that same instant, the protagonist said that he would never refuse an opportunity like that, one he had been waiting for his entire life. The two were surprised by his quick and confident answer because he had not hesitated over a single word. Ma Yao said that it was fine, but even so, she needed to ask officially. She called the protagonist by name, asking if he was willing to form a blood pact with them, receive the divine veins, and help them recover their cultivation in the future. Xiang shouted that he accepted, as long as it could make him even stronger. He would do anything because there were many people in his life that he still needed to protect. Mei Yao laughed and said that was very good while taking something from inside her clothes. She pointed out that now it was time to begin. The protagonist sat down and the two began placing the divine veins inside him. His body almost collapsed. Energy took over everything, and his veins bulged across his body. The amount of chi was so great that blood was beginning to seep out of his body like sweat, but he continued resisting with everything he had. Mei Yao pointed out that the protagonist's meridians were already broken, and his divine consciousness was also constantly shrinking. Perhaps the fusion of the divine veins was still far too difficult for him. Suddenly, a deafening sound echoed throughout the entire place. Ma Yao was startled, asking if that was the sound of a demonic beast, and questioned whether the protagonist had touched the infernal spiritual grass. Yu also became worried, saying that the beasts protecting the infernal spiritual grass were above the 7th level, and if that continued, they would definitely be eliminated there. Ma Yao told Xiang that his current condition was far too complicated for them to continue, and that if he gave up now, he could still save half of his life. But Xiang, almost fainting from the pain, refused to give up. He began crying blood, thinking that he had been born without a spiritual vein and, even with all his effort, had not managed to catch up to the others. When his family needed support, he could not help, and now the opportunity was right before his hands. For that reason, he had to keep moving forward. He opened his eyes and shouted from the bottom of his heart, saying that even if it cost him his life, he would not give up. His entire body began emitting a strange pressure and completely collapsed. He fell unconscious to the ground and the two became worried. Suddenly, the entire place began to collapse, and as soon as the two looked back, they saw a giant demonic beast approaching. Ma Yao asked her sister what they should do now, but Yu saw something surprising and asked the goddess of the 9th heaven to look at the protagonist's wounds and meridians. Mei Yao was surprised to see that the wounds were healing on their own, which meant that it might have been a success. They pointed out that if that brat really was that lucky, once he completely refined the 2 divine veins, perhaps he would become the most powerful being on that planet. Yu pointed out that he still needed more time, so the two of them had to support him, meaning they needed to resist with everything they had because perhaps he was their hope. Ma Yao agreed and began fighting the beast. The two tried to buy as much time as possible, however, they were knocked down by a single attack, since their strength had been drastically reduced. Yu thought that if they still had even a bit of their original power, that beast would be eliminated with just one strike. The demonic beast noticed the protagonist lying down and went toward him, trying to attack him. Yu once again tried to protect him, saying that the monster could not get any closer, and used the soul-seizing devil curse to try to restrain its head. The bindings worked, and they managed to knock the beast down before it could get any closer to the protagonist. Yu thought that this was only to be expected because the situation was extremely complicated, but she only needed to buy a little more time. Suddenly, the beast got up and began lifting her with the strength of its tail. She was slammed hard into the ground while thinking that she needed to restrain that beast no matter the cost. The demonic beast once again looked at the protagonist and prepared to attack him. The two began trembling, seeing that the situation was not good at all, because there was nothing else they could do. However, suddenly a crushing pressure began to emanate, knocking the beast down. The two were surprised, and Mei Yao told her sister that the fusion speed had been faster than they expected. Suddenly, the protagonist stood up like a true god, emanating energy from his body. Apparently, he had completed the fusion of good and evil, and the two divine veins were under his complete control. He felt all that chi flowing through his body and wondered if this was the feeling of having divine veins because power seemed to be gushing out of his body. He looked at the two of them and thanked them for almost sacrificing their lives to buy him a little more time. Mei Yao told that brat that now was not the time to celebrate and pointed behind him because the demonic beast was getting up again. She asked him to try facing that monster to test his new strength. The demonic beast charged at them with uncontrollable fury, but the protagonist approached the two and held them in his arms, dodging the beast's attack. He went to a higher point and left the two there, saying that they would be safe while he played around a little with that monster. He leapt toward the beast and realized that his speed was impressive, thinking that his reaction time and jumping power were several times greater than before. But what he really wanted to discover was the true power of his fists. He struck the monster directly, but was surprised to see that it had no effect. The demonic beast gathered energy in its mouth and fired several times. He dodged all the attacks and became increasingly irritated, thinking that the beast really was very difficult to deal with. Mei Yao shouted at the protagonist, saying that even a beast could use true chi to attack, and he, like a true idiot, was still using only brute strength. Xiang looked at his hand and saw that it was imbued with chi, becoming surprised, because he had forgotten that he now had more than just brute strength. While dodging the attacks, he shouted, saying that now he could feel an aura flowing rapidly through his meridians and about to explode. Apparently, that was the power of true chi. He attacked again, calling the demonic beast into the fight because now he wanted to fight for real. The demonic beast tried to attack with its energy again, but the protagonist managed to dodge and approached it. He apologized, saying that this time he was even faster, and landed a punch so strong that it sent the beast flying away, causing enormous destruction in the area. He was surprised by the amount of power he currently possessed, and that entire place began to collapse. Mei Yao told the protagonist that he was being far too careless and asked him to come to her, because that place was about to cave in and they needed to get out of there quickly. Xiang jumped over to them and said that he would take them out of there now. Mei Yao extended her hand toward him and said that he needed to drip a drop of blood there, because that would make him recognized as a disciple. She pointed out that it was a storage ring and that he could place the two of them inside it. The divine beast tried to run away to hide from all of that. Mei Yao said that they needed to leave now, before it was too late. The two entered the ring and the protagonist released his strength again, telling his father and Xian to wait for him. A short time later, inside his room, he heated the water and placed it inside the bathtub, telling Mei Yao that the water was already hot, and that if she wanted to take a bath, she could enter the Shen family's bathtub. However, he did not know why they needed to do that inside that room. Mei Yao scolded him, saying that their identities must not be known by others, otherwise he would die. She began taking off her clothes, saying that she could finally take a good bath. The protagonist became embarrassed, asking if he could go out to watch the door, but Mei Yao said no, asking him to stay there. Yu explained that he should just turn around and close his eyes while the two of them enjoyed that bath. The two entered the bathtub and began to relax. Mei Yao remembered that she still had something to give Xiang. He, who was already embarrassed, asked what it was, but she asked him to come closer. With his eyes closed and his face red, he approached, and she asked him to lower his head a little more. With the tips of her fingers, she touched the protagonist's forehead and began transmitting something to him. He was surprised, questioning what that was. Mei Yao explained that it was the cultivation method she practiced, called the divine art of the four symbols, which had been passed through her spiritual consciousness. In addition, her understanding of that cultivation had also been transmitted, so he only needed to practice. She pointed out that according to the cultivation method, he needed to circulate the true chi inside his body to feel it. Xiang sat on the floor and said that he would try to do that immediately. Slowly, he began applying the method and told Mei Yao that he could feel a wildfire inside his body. Mei Yao explained that this was the flame of true chi and that, from the looks of it, he had started very quickly. However, he needed to keep practicing and trying to control all that power perfectly. Yu said that she used to be an alchemist, so he could also try the secret method of alchemy. However, it required extremely great talent, so he should not force himself to learn it. Xiang pointed out that those cultivation and heart methods had been reflected in his mind, and to transmit so much information through divine sense, they had to be at least at the 8th level of the mortal martial realm, or perhaps even above the 9th. Mei Yao began laughing and Xiang asked if he had said something wrong. She explained that he should know that above the mortal martial realm, there was the true martial realm, the extreme state martial realm, and so on. The path of cultivation was much longer than he could imagine. The Chenwu continent, where he lived, was only a drop in the ocean of the martial arts world. You pointed out that the enemies they normally faced could easily destroy the strongest man he had ever heard of with a snap of their fingers, so it was impossible to reveal their existence to anyone, including his loved ones. Xiang was shocked, saying that he had thought the ninth level of the mortal martial realm was an incomparable goal. But after hearing what the two of them said, that meant everyone was far too weak. Ma Yao asked him not to worry so much because now he had the yin and yang divine veins. Because of that, he only needed to properly practice alchemy and the divine art of the four symbols. If he did it correctly and with all his effort, he would eventually become a god of the martial arts world. Ma Yao stepped out of the bathtub and laughed, saying that she would really like to keep bathing for another 2 hours. Yu warned the protagonist that his foundation was still very weak now, and that, when the time came, she would also teach him demonic cultivation methods. The protagonist became happy and excited, saying that he would improve himself as much as possible and would not disappoint them. Suddenly, someone burst in, shouting the protagonist's name. His father, who was crying, said that he was finally all right. Xiang quickly stored the two of them inside the storage ring. His father hugged him and said that he had heard that he had just returned from the immortal Devil Cliff. He asked if the qi gathered there had caused any adverse effect on his body. Xiang tried to calm his father, saying that he was perfectly fine. Ma Yao asked him not to worry because they had already hidden inside the storage ring and no one could enter there. Tianhu remained worried about his son and held his hand, saying that he wanted to see if he was injured. But as soon as he held the protagonist's hand, he was surprised and asked if he really had a spiritual vein. Jiang laughed and said that the infernal spiritual grass lived up to its reputation as a 1,000-year-old herb, and that the risk had been completely worth it. His father remained excited and began to cry, saying that this was very good to hear. Jiang asked his father to enter the competition for the position of patriarch, because now he was confident that everything would go well. Tianhu celebrated with his son, saying that from the looks of it, this was the will of the heavens, and that this was excellent news. He laughed and said that this time they would allow the entire family to see what kind of father and son pair they were, because they would become the leaders of the family. 1 week later, at the spiritual pill hall, the protagonist was preparing to enter. He thought that, after a week of practice, apparently he could already control the flame of true qi, just as Ma Yao had said. If he wanted to improve his power quickly, he needed to rely on elixirs. However, there was still a big problem. A pei-yuan body pill cost 5,000 large spiritual stones. Not to mention refining pills, he could not even buy a few herbs. Ma Yao asked him to stop being so foolish, because if he could not buy herbs, he just needed to grow them. The protagonist asked if she was making some kind of joke with him, because some herbs took around 3 years to be cultivated. Ma Yao pointed out that this was for ordinary people, because she had her ways of doing that. The protagonist eventually agreed and went to a shop, asking the seller if he had some azure spiritual herb seeds and elemental bloodflower seeds, because if he did, he would like 5 of each. The merchant said that he did and asked him to wait a little, because he would get them right away. Zhenhua appeared again, saying that from the looks of it, the family trash had returned, and asked if he was buying some herbs for his own health. The city governor's daughter, named Hua Yunxin, asked if he was Xiang and pointed out that it was very embarrassing for Zhenhua's family to have an eldest grandson like him. But the protagonist simply ignored the two of them, and Yunxin became angry, asking how trash like him could ignore Zhenhua like that. Zhenhua felt offended and irritated, asking the protagonist if he wanted to be beaten again. But once again, he was ignored. Because of that, he charged forward, but Xiang moved at an impressive speed and dodged the attack. Zhenhua was frightened and asked how he had managed to dodge. Xiang said that Zhenhua trained only his true qi and not his body, so how did he expect to hit anyone with such ridiculous speed? Zhenhua attacked again, saying that this was not the time for him to be proud. Blood began dripping onto the floor. Xiang had caught Zhenhua's attack with only one hand. Zhenhua laughed, saying that the protagonist was very foolish and questioned how he dared to challenge him, because now the bones in his hand must be broken. Xiang looked at Zhenhua and pointed out that he had thought he was only physically weak, but from the looks of it, he was useless even when it came to using true qi. Xiang told Zhenhua to watch carefully how qi should be used. Just by releasing the pressure from his body, a powerful wave swept through the place. Zhenhua was terrified, asking how a piece of trash could do that. Yunxin shouted that it was getting very hot there, and asked Zhenhua why he was standing still doing nothing, ordering him to quickly teach that trash a lesson. But before the fight between the two could continue, someone arrived, shouting for them to stop, and pointing out that this was the spiritual pill hall, questioning who dared to be rude there. The protagonist introduced himself, saying his name, and apologized, saying that it had not been his intention to offend anyone. However, he pointed at Genhua, saying that his younger brother was an incompetent member of the family and had been acting arrogantly, so he had to be disciplined. The man remained irritated, telling the protagonist that all of that was his own matter, and questioned again how he dared disturb the master of the spiritual pill hall while he was refining pills. Xiang also became irritated, telling Genhua that he was very lucky and that, if he was still not convinced, then he would be waiting at the Patriarch Hall. Genhua said that Xiang was not worthy of entering the Patriarch Hall, but the protagonist pointed out that now that he had a spiritual vein, it was only natural for him to help his own father in the selection. Because of that, Genhua should pray that he would not be beaten too badly. But Genhua remained irritated and wondered what kind of pill that piece of trash had taken to become so lucky. However, he thought that the elders had passed down a spirit-level martial skill to him, the Tianyang cleaving axe, and if he could master it before the Patriarch selection, dealing with that trash would be very easy. Genhua called Yunxin to leave, but she questioned whether he was really going to let the protagonist get away like that. Xiang apologized to the owner of the pill shop, saying that he needed to leave, but the people present were impressed, asking if that young man had really managed to master the true qi flame at that age. From the looks of it, the Shen family was going to produce a good alchemist. Another person questioned whether they really thought someone could become a good alchemist just by mastering the true qi flame. Because if that were the case, why would there be so few alchemists in the entire Southern Martial Empire? Besides, there was still a long road ahead, and without a master to guide him on that path, he would not be able to refine a pill in his entire life. Suddenly, another person entered the room, saying that for that boy's age, it was quite rare to cultivate the true qi flame to that level of purity. The craftsman looked back and asked if his master had seen it too, pointing out that he thought that boy was very talented and asking whether they should recruit him. But the master said that he would not accept him. He was the chief master of the spiritual pill hall. The master told his disciple that he should send a message to all the alchemists in that city, because no one was allowed to teach alchemy to that young man. A short time later, in his family courtyard, Xiang was impressed by the result. He told Ma Yao that the dragon saliva technique she had taught him was truly incredible, because he could not believe that he had managed to mature those herbs in only 3 days. Mei Yao spread saliva on another pill and said that dragon saliva was made from the essence of heaven and earth. Because of that, it contained incomparably majestic vitality. However, the protagonist's dragon saliva was still very weak and could currently only affect those miscellaneous herbs. But when his cultivation became pure and solid enough in the future, even 1,000-year-old spiritual trees would have their growth greatly accelerated. She tossed out her dragon saliva and the protagonist was impressed, saying that the dragon saliva condensed by her really was much more efficient. Because of that, he needed to practice even more. She held his face and asked if he would like her to help him improve his breathing technique, because if he begged enough, she could teach him mouth to mouth. The protagonist became embarrassed again, telling her that maybe that was a little inappropriate. Mei Yao became irritated, saying that she was only teasing him a little, so why was he taking it so seriously? He took some herbs and began concentrating his energy, saying that with that amount of herbs, he could finally try making a pill. He asked if alchemy really required them to prepare so much food. Mei Yao, who was eating, said that this was very obvious and pointed out that they needed to prepare plenty of food because they did not know how long it would take. And she questioned whether he really wanted to starve everyone inside there. Yu Yu was delighted by the taste of the food, because she could not even remember how long it had been since she had eaten food from the mortal world. The protagonist held a lotus in his hand, saying that he did not know how long it would take to make that pill, but that did not matter. He released his chi, saying that first he needed to try using his divine sense. He entered the divine realm and was surprised, asking where he was. Suddenly, a monster appeared right in front of him, and he was startled, asking what that was. Ma Yao opened a door in surprise, saying that she could not believe he had managed to enter the divine realm so quickly. This meant that he really was very talented in that. The protagonist, still lost in that situation, asked what the divine realm was. Ma Yao explained that it was her master's unique Tao of alchemy, capable of creating a spatial realm using divine sense. In addition, while he was there, his true qi flame would improve greatly, and refinement and alchemy would be 10 times more effective than outside. In addition, she also explained that strange beast. It was the transformation of his true qi fire called Bifeng. After passing the first test, he would be able to learn the refining method to create mortal-level pills. The content of the test changed from person to person, but he needed to figure out how to face it. They left the divine realm, asking him to think about it on his own. Xiang, still not fully understanding all of that, simply decided to face that firebird. Bifeng attacked with a fireball, and the protagonist asked it to wait a little because he was not ready to begin. but he managed to dodge the attack by a narrow margin and pointed out that this was an alchemy technique, so he could not make a mistake, because if he used his flame, something incredible might happen. The two prepared to attack again with firepower, and their attacks collided with each other. Xiang laughed, saying that from the looks of it, he was right. That test was meant to condense his true qi flame at the right moment and repel the opponent's attacks. Baifeng began channeling the flames around it and suddenly split into three, beginning to attack the protagonist. But he was not afraid, saying that it was only a matter of 1 against 3 and that he would not have that many problems. However, he was caught off guard. One of the attacks passed through his defense, and he was hit without knowing why his strategy had failed. He tried to analyze the situation a little better and realized that perhaps the size of those birds represented the difference in firepower. Because of that, he needed to use different levels of purity in the true qi flame to deal with them. Just like in alchemy, the required heat needed to be constantly adjusted. After understanding that, the protagonist became excited and asked the birds to attack again because he wanted to try once more. The three attacked at the same time. He dodged all the attacks and began advancing, but as soon as he managed to get close enough to attack one of the bird disappeared and appeared behind him, landing a direct attack. Xiang became irritated, questioning how that little bird could be so fast. The three began flying in circles, creating a huge vortex of fire. Xiang became trapped in the middle of it and thought that although they had become smaller, the speed and frequency of their attacks had become several times faster. So it would be necessary to distinguish the power of the fire while avoiding the attacks and also perform a counterattack quickly enough. Xiang decided to put his strategies into practice and moved quickly, dodging the attacks. He approached one of the birds, but a huge explosion hit him and threw him back down again. He pointed out that this power was truly incredible and that, from the looks of it, he had underestimated his enemy. But Xiang began to tremble and refused to lose, saying that he wanted to try again. 7 days later, on the day of the patriarch's selection, at the Shen family mansion, Shen Haohai, who was at the 8th level of the mortal martial realm, commander of the Shen family and competitor for the position of family patriarch, warned the protagonist's father that, according to the family rules, the patriarch and his relatives must have good cultivation. He pointed out that Xiang was trash without a spiritual vein, so Tianhu did not seem worthy of competing for the position of patriarch. Tianhu pointed out that the entire city knew that his son had the potential to make a variety of pills. So how did Hao Hai dare call the protagonist a loser? He asked if the family factions agreed with that. Shen Han Hai, at the 7th level of the mortal martial realm and Hao Hai's younger brother, asked what that had to do with anything, because the protagonist had gotten into conflict with the master of the spiritual pill hall. Another group said that, in the entire city, no alchemist should teach him. Without a master, who knew how long he would take to make a pill? Xiang jumped into the middle of the arena, questioning who had said that he could not be an alchemist. He held the lotus in his hand and laughed, saying that he might not be that talented, but even so, he could still make pills without a master. Han Hai laughed and asked the protagonist if it had really been so hot these past few days that he had fried his own brain, because it took at least 1 year to learn alchemy and he had mastered the true qi flame only a few days ago. Han Hai continued mocking him and said that he would play with the protagonist there in the arena. However, if the protagonist lost, he would have to give something decent in return. Tianhu took responsibility for that and said that if his son lost, he would withdraw from the competition for the position of patriarch. He looked at the protagonist and thought that if his son was confident in the wager, then he was sure that he had a trump card hidden away. Xiang laughed, thanked his father, and walked over to Han Hai, asking if that was enough. Han Hai laughed and said yes, pointing out that he was happy to have an opponent. Xiang released his qi, leaving Han Hai a little surprised, and laughed, saying that it was time to begin. 1 hour later, the protagonist was still focused on refining the pills, while some people questioned whether he could really be capable of doing that. Most of the people present watching said no, unless he was a genius among geniuses. Xiang was focused, thinking that cultivation in the divine realm had truly been effective. His true qi flame seemed to be dancing at his fingertips, and every change was clear. From the looks of it, he had not been beaten up by those 3 stinking birds for 7 days and 7 nights in vain. Meanwhile, inside the storage space of the ring, Yu Yu and Ma Yao were watching, and Yu Yu asked her sister how long it had taken her to pass the test. Ma Yao said that maybe it had been 10 days or even 15, because it had been a long time and she could not remember clearly. Yu Yu smiled, saying that, from the looks of it, the protagonist was more talented than her. Ma Yao became angry, crying, and asked who had said that, because their master had not even helped her back then. On the other hand, she had carefully guided the protagonist. However, she had to admit that passing the test in 7 days was truly incredible, which meant that Boy had a bright future ahead of him. Xiang finally finished his work and asked them to open it, leaving everyone surprised. He took out 5 pills and asked them to check for themselves. Some people held the pills in their hands, saying that this body refinement pill seemed even purer than those from the spiritual pill hall. And from the looks of it, that boy's strength already far surpassed that of a high-level spiritual vein. Hanhai refused to accept it and, irritated, told the protagonist that it was impossible and that he had probably cheated because it could not be true. Therefore, those pills could not be body refinement pills. Xiang kept smiling, questioning whether he was really saying that those body pills were not genuine, because he had heard some interesting things from his subordinates recently. He had heard that Hanhai had scarce yang qi and was weak in certain aspects. The protagonist tossed one of his pills, saying that he was worried about his health, so perhaps he could take that pill. Hanhai began trembling with anger, asking Xiang not to go too far with his words. Genhua, who was also watching that, could not believe it. The other people said that, from the looks of it, the protagonist had really managed to refine a pill, and now the entire family had finally produced an alchemist. Because if that was really the case, then the crucial person of that family had to be changed immediately. The other man agreed, saying that if the Shen family truly cultivated an alchemist, it would only be a matter of time before they became the largest family in the city. Genhua, who could no longer bear it, shouted that he would not let that happen. He entered the arena saying that Xiang was being far too complacent, and because of that, he would act on behalf of the elders and teach him a good lesson. Jiang asked if he had already forgotten how miserably he had lost at the spiritual pill hall that day. Genhua prepared to fight, saying that he wanted to see if the protagonist would remain so arrogant after suffering punishment for his attack. Xiang was surprised to see the Tianyang cleaving axe attack and questioned how his true qi could be so fierce. As soon as the attack landed, it caused a huge explosion, drawing everyone's attention, but the protagonist managed to defend himself. Genhua said that it was worthy of its reputation since it was a spirit-level skill and had so much power with just one strike. Tianhu was also impressed by the calamity, because that spirit-level family skill was only given to members who had made great contributions. He questioned who had secretly taught that technique, breaking all the rules. Hanhai told Tianhu to stay calm since Genhua had already cultivated that technique, so there was no point in continuing to argue about it. Now they only needed to see whether Genhua could truly live up to the opportunity given to him. The protagonist dodged all the attacks, found an opening, and prepared to attack with the dragon fist. But Genhua looked at him, laughing, saying that he was very foolish because he had left that opening on purpose. He counterattacked, but Xiang managed to dodge quickly after getting to a comfortable distance. He thought that he had underestimated his opponent, because it was basically impossible to attack him up close, and if he could find a chance, he would only need one move to end it. Ma Yao said that if the protagonist could not find an opening, he only needed to create one. The protagonist was confused by what she had just said. Ma Yao asked if he really could not remember the martial artist's roar at the spiritual pill hall, because he had felt his consciousness shake and his 5 senses become trapped for a moment. Xiang agreed that the roar could truly shake people's minds and hearts. She explained that it was a type of sound skill, a skill similar to the Azure Dragon Fist he had just used, but now he only needed to follow her instructions. Mei Yao asked him to trap the qi between his lips and teeth while channeling his true qi. He needed to imagine the qi bursting from his mouth like water from the mountains, the hills collapsing and exploding from his own mouth. Genhua continued advancing, saying that the protagonist was a fool for thinking he could meditate now. He prepared to attack, but the protagonist released an incredibly fierce roar as if it were a dragon. The people around them were surprised, and Genhua realized that he had been tricked by that bastard, but when he looked ahead, he no longer saw the protagonist. Jiang appeared beside him and asked what he was looking for, then struck him with the Azure Dragon Fist, winning with a single blow. He approached his opponent and asked if he was convinced now. Hao Hai ran over to his son, who was unconscious, and began shouting at him, asking if he was all right. Genhua, who could barely keep his eyes open, asked his father to stop shaking him, otherwise his bones would break. Hao Hai continued questioning his son about the meaning of all that. He became so furious that he pointed at the protagonist, saying that, regardless of clan brotherhood, Xiang had seriously injured Genhua. He questioned how the Shen family could have someone as vicious as him. The protagonist pointed out that every one of Genhua's movements had carried killing intent, and that, from the looks of it, he had not been very concerned about his opponent's life. Jiang stated that he had only spared that trash because he valued the clan's friendship greatly. Genhua's mother went to the elders, saying that he needed to do something for her son. She called out to her companions, asking if everyone had heard what the protagonist had just said, questioning whether he could still be considered human, so he had to be punished for seriously injuring her son. But Tianhu, together with the other half of the clan, said that this was complete nonsense because it was obvious that her son was inferior to others, and he had failed to defeat the protagonist even after secretly cultivating a spirit-level skill. The fight between them began to get uglier and uglier. Suddenly, another person arrived saying that, from the looks of it, the current Shen family was a complete mess, and questioned how they dared to want to marry the young miss of the Xue family with such qualifications and conduct, because from the looks of it, they did not seem worthy of such a thing at all. Han Hai asked who that guy was and how he dared to be so rude to the Shen family. The man had something attached to his clothing, and Tianhu asked if he was from the Yao family of Wohu. The man held up his identity token and said that, on behalf of the Yao family, he had come there to send a message to the protagonist. He shouted, saying that he advised the protagonist to break off his engagement with Miss Xue Xianxian as quickly as possible. The protagonist became irritated, asking if it was really the Yao family's dog's turn to judge his engagement with Xianxian. The man threw a sword in front of the protagonist, saying that it was only a reminder, and that he should not blame him for being rude if the protagonist insisted. The man pointed out that it was not only the Yao family's request to break off the engagement, but also a notice from the Xue family itself. Because the Xue family believed that only the young master of the Yao family, Tianhua, was a perfect match for Xianxian, and not a loser like the protagonist. The people said that this guy was the genius alchemist of the Yao family. They said that at 16 years old, he had already refined an intermediate mortal grade pill, so it was no wonder the Xue family wanted to renounce the engagement. Xiang questioned that if the Xue family really wanted to renounce the engagement, then why had they not sent someone to say that? The man said that it was all the protagonist's fault because he did not know what their charming and beautiful daughter saw in trash like him, but she was determined not to break off the engagement. Xiang thought that he had already expected that because there was no way she had given up. The protagonist said that in that case he also refused. The man told the protagonist that he would let him take the initiative to renounce the engagement to preserve his prestige, because he would not want to be humiliated. Because if he really did not want to refuse, he only needed to have a competition with their young master with the annulment at stake. When that happened, that ridiculous honors Xiang thought he had would be destroyed before the three families. The people became a little worried, wondering whether the protagonist could compete with Tianhua in alchemy. Xiang said that he did not care because he accepted the challenge. In addition, he even let them choose whether it would be in martial arts or alchemy. Hao Hai asked if the protagonist really was an idiot because he had only managed to refine a mortal grade pill in alchemy, while Tianhua's experience surpassed his by at least 10 years. And if he lost, he would not only lose his own honor, the prestige of the entire family would also be ruined. Jiang pointed out that just as Xianxian had never given up on him, he would never give up on her either, and he would win no matter what the circumstances, methods, or rules were. The man who had gone there to deliver the message once again looked down on the protagonist, saying that he was just an ungrateful brat. The man began to leave and told the protagonist to pick that up if he really agreed, because he would be notified when the date of the competition was set. Xiang picked up the sword he had thrown on the ground and asked the man to wait, then threw it with great force in his direction. The sword passed beside the man's face, causing a slight cut. Xiang said that he should take the Yao family's things away so they would not dirty the Shen family courtyard. The man became extremely irritated by that, saying that, from the looks of it, he did not know how to behave, and charged forward saying that today he would eliminate the protagonist in the name of his young master. Xiang felt a tremendous force pushing him backward, but managed to defend against the attack. Tianhu advanced like a lion and forced the messenger to retreat immediately before an overwhelming force. Tianhu pointed out that a deacon of the Yao family was thinking too highly of himself in the Shen family's territory. He questioned whether the man really thought there was no one there who could beat him to death. Tianhu stated that even if the messenger were killed there, the Yao family would not say a single word. The man was frightened and surprised by that and ended up leaving the matter behind, saying that it was fine because everything would be decided in the competition. Tianhu went to his son worriedly, but the protagonist stood up, saying that he was fine. Tianhu told the elders that, regarding the fight between Xiang and Zhenhua, it would be best for everyone to give way, because the protagonist would be responsible for refining pills to help him recover, and they would no longer speak about the matter of the family's spirit-level skill being passed down improperly. He asked Elder Pei what he thought of the proposal. Pei, not knowing what to answer, said that it was fine, because they were all members of the same family in the end. After that, the patriarch selection continued. Xiang also began a special cultivation session in the mountains. Ma Yao had taught him the divine art of the 4 symbols, which contained the 4 true qi of the azure dragon, the white tiger, the vermilion bird, and the black tortoise. He continued practicing and with small movements caused great explosions. He pointed out that during that week, the white tiger qi had begun to take effect, but unfortunately, it was not as smooth and controllable as the azure dragon qi. During that time, his father also made great progress, defeating one competitor after another. And finally, the last day of the patriarch's selection arrived. Hanhai warned Tianhu that this was the final battle and that, if by chance he could defeat the two of them, then the position of patriarch would be his. Tianhu asked if the two of them would fight alone or at the same time. Hao Hai said that he would fight alone, otherwise he would not be able to convince anyone. Tianhu began releasing his power, saying that it was time to begin, and pointed out that he would show no mercy. The spectators were impressed, seeing that this was Beast Transformation, the iconic martial skill of the 8th level of the martial realm. The skill used true chi to change one's own state, using the special power contained in birds, beasts, or weapons. But Hao Hai was not afraid and laughed, saying that now it was time to see who could really remain standing in that arena in the end, because only one would be left, either him, the Furious Wolf, or Tianhu, the Thunder Tiger. The battle between the two began, their blows collided, and the protagonist's father told his opponent that he really had not expected him to master that skill so quickly, since he had not been at the 8th level of the mortal martial realm for very long. Hao Hai said that Tianhu was not bad either, because he had spent all his limited resources on his son, and had still succeeded in cultivating very pure true chi. The two continued facing each other and moving at an impressive speed. Both of them were happy because it was satisfying to face someone as powerful as themselves. The other family members were beginning to get a little frightened, because this was a battle between two martial artists at the 8th level of the mortal martial realm. 1 hour later, Hao Hai was on the ground and Tianhu used the Thunder Tiger Absolute Light Transformation. An extremely powerful attack struck Hao Hai and ended the fight. Tianhu ordered Hao Hai to submit. Hao Hai admitted defeat and told the protagonist's father that even though he had managed to win that round, he had not achieved a very advantageous victory. Tianhu had indeed been badly injured in the previous fight, besides being completely exhausted. Hanhai, who was in the 7th realm, told Tianhu that in his current state, the next battle could be a matter of life and death, so it would be better for him to give up. But Tianhu questioned how he could give up the position of patriarch. The protagonist entered the arena and went to his father, saying that he had managed to watch his battle after finishing his cultivation, and that he had looked very powerful when he won. Tianhu said that was obvious, and pointed out that he was the strongest. The problem was that he was already too old. He began leaving the arena while being carried, and Xiang asked his father not to worry and to leave the rest to him. Tianhu was surprised by this and asked the protagonist if he was sure. Xiang called out to all the seniors and begged them to allow him to fight in his father's place. Hanhai prepared to fight, but before beginning, he warned the protagonist that this was a competition related to the position of patriarch, and once the fight began, life or death would not matter, so he needed to be sure that he agreed to that. Xiang said that it was fine. Hanhai said that he would let Xiang make the first move and asked him to attack with everything he had. The protagonist advanced furiously, saying that in that case he would not be polite. Xiang thought that after this week of cultivation, he had managed to reach the 5th level of the mortal martial realm, but he still did not know what effect that would have when facing someone at the 7th level. Hanhai was surprised and questioned why Xiang's true chi seemed a little strange. Xiang used the stormy killing fist. The pressure of the blow was extremely strong, and the sound was also deafening. Pei questioned whether he was the same protagonist as before, because the blow he had just launched had the power of the 6th level. Xiang was confused and asked if his blow had worked, but Hanhai had made an ice shield in front of him, saying that someone at the 5th level of the mortal martial realm could truly use true chi in that way. He laughed and said that he had underestimated Xiang. Xiang asked if it really had no effect since it had been a strike using the full power of his Azure Dragon, True Chi. Hanhai began to transform and told the protagonist that this was the first time he was fighting with his transformation. Xiang was surprised, because was that not a skill only available at the 8th level? Hanhai explained that he had already completed the 7th level of the martial realm and was only waiting for a breakthrough. In addition, he had also mastered some beast martial skills, and he questioned whether the protagonist now understood the situation he had entered, because now he knew that he would definitely lose that competition. Hanhai began attacking, but the protagonist moved quickly, dodged all the attacks, and tried once again to use his Azure Dragon Fist. But again, his attack was blocked without causing any effect. Xiang thought that he needed to retreat to gain distance and think of a strategy to attack effectively, but Hanhai appeared in front of him, saying that he was far too slow, and landed a direct blow, sending him flying away with everything. Hanhai pointed out that if the protagonist had at least 10 more years of training, then he might have won that fight. But unfortunately, today he needed to win the position of patriarch. Hanhai attacked again with the 100 Fisher Glacial Stomp. The protagonist did everything he could to try to dodge the attacks. The full force of the Azure Dragon True Chi could not injure him, and there was not much True Chi left. He tried to attack because if he could not dodge forever, then he should not dodge. But Hanhai prepared to finish the fight, saying that he would crush him like an egg striking a rock. He attacked again and caused a small explosion, but the protagonist appeared laughing. Hanhai was surprised and admitted that Xiang's progress was far beyond everyone's expectations. But he did not have to be so reckless when he encountered someone he could not defeat. Xiang said that he had also thought about that, however. He had thought of a way to win that fight. Even if it was a tiny chance, it was still worth trying. Hanhai told the protagonist that no matter how much he tried, he could still only cause that level of refinement. So how did he think he could win that fight? Xiang stated that this was nothing, but at least it could prove that he had a way to destroy all the ice cubes that had been created there. Hanhai stared at him and pointed out that the protagonist's technique really was a little strange. Xiang thought that with his next punch, he needed to mix the White Tiger Chi with the Azure Dragon Chi. With his current level of mastery over the White Tiger Divine Art, perhaps its power alone would not be enough. However, he had to break the ice shield with his Azure Dragon Chi, but that had also not been enough to break through it alone. So the combination of two different types of Chi would have a special power. Hanhai said that it did not matter what the protagonist was planning, because after the next blow he received, he would be unable to stand up again. Besides, he did not have time to keep thinking. Hanhai created several condensed ice needles and tried to attack the protagonist, but he dodged the attack with his impressive speed. Ma Yao praised her disciple, saying that he had managed to discover the spiritual technique on his own because he used different types of Qi, and because of that he created a turbulent flow of Qi that disrupted the Qi flow of his opponent. Xiang asked what that really meant. Ma Yao began to explain and said that when he used one type of Qi, the ice shield would only be affected by the Qi in one direction. But when he used more than one Qi, they fused to form a turbulent flow, so the direction of the effect on the ice shield also increased. Under the effect of different Qi flows, it became easier to destroy the ice shield. The protagonist said that, in other words, as long as more types of Qi were used at the same time, the greater the effect would be. He prepared himself, saying that he had finally understood. Hanhai looked at the protagonist and said that the boy was giving him a bad feeling, so he needed to end it immediately. Xiang shouted, saying that he would fuse all the true Qi of the divine art of the four symbols into his next strike. But when he tried to do that, he realized that his meridians were vibrating wildly and his power seemed to be getting sucked away. Because of that, even standing was becoming extremely difficult. Hanhai noticed this and laughed, saying that the protagonist finally could not endure the fight anymore, and out of respect for all his effort, he would put an end to it with his next move. But Jiang refused to lose, saying that he needed to win no matter what happened. He leapt forward and went straight against his opponent's attack, using the Five Elements Fist. His attack pierced through Hanhai's ice and struck him, making him fall to the ground. Everyone could not believe it. Elder Pei shouted, saying that Jiang was the new winner, so Tianhu would become the head of the family. Everyone began celebrating, saying that the boy had become the hope of the entire family. Tianhu also praised his son, saying that he really was incredible, but the protagonist was at his limit after fusing all 5 elements. He fell to the ground almost fainting and quickly lost consciousness, being taken to his room. Ma Yao said that the boy was very foolish because she did not know whether he had been very brave or a complete idiot. After all, letting true Qi run through all his meridians like that. If the protagonist had been an ordinary person, he would have been crippled if he had not died. But Jiang smiled and asked her if he could really still be considered an ordinary person. Even trembling in pain, he stood up to show that he was fine and alive because he felt that she did not really believe him. Yu, who was irritated by that whole situation, scolded the protagonist, questioning what he had been thinking because he really could have lost his life. Xiang laughed, saying that from the looks of it, Sister Yu also cared a lot about him. She became embarrassed and pointed out that if it were not for the blood contract, no one would care about his life. Suddenly, the protagonist remembered something and ran out, saying that he had almost forgotten. He said that Ma Yao had told him the infernal spiritual grass could help with recovery, and had advised him to cut half of it and put it into medicinal wine. And now it was time to drink it. He offered some to them. Ma Yao was impressed, saying that the infernal spiritual grass was known as a treasure of heaven and earth. 1 cup could restore 10% of the physical strength they had before being injured. The protagonist said that if it was that effective, then he should put the remaining half inside as well. But Yu asked him to keep it and not waste it for nothing, because the infernal spiritual grass was a treasure in the mortal martial world, but had little effect on people of their realm. Mei Yao said that this was true. In addition, she pointed out that the protagonist had to work hard to reach the true martial realm, so he could help her. Xiang said that the once unreachable power of the true martial realm seemed to be getting closer and closer. Yu Yu was once again very irritated, saying that the protagonist was stupid, because that was what those in the mortal martial world thought. She asked if a cultivator of the true martial realm was extremely powerful. Mayao pointed out that she had just remembered something. Yu Yu threw the protagonist to the ground, saying that above the true martial realm, there were the extreme state realm and the nirvana tribulation realm, and they were strong enough to even ascend to the martial and mortal world. So if he heard that, he had to stop being a boy with no ambition. She stepped beside him and Xiang became frightened, saying that he knew that and asking her not to be so angry. Mei Yao explained that Yu Yu was drunk because she had just remembered that Yu Yu rarely drank and got drunk with just one drop. Xiang said that he would have greatly appreciated receiving that information a little earlier, but Yu Yu was already acting a little differently. Mei Yao explained that cultivators could use true qi to dissipate alcohol. The last time Yu Yu got drunk like that was hundreds of years ago, so no one could remember something from that long ago. Yu Yu began to lose control and with just one movement split the floor and the bed in half. She climbed on top of the protagonist, saying that now she would train him properly because he had to hurry up and improve immediately. They went somewhere else, and Yu Yu began her movements, attacking the protagonist several times. The protagonist did everything he could to dodge, but thought that she had a yin constitution, requiring potent yang true qi to resist. Although training with her was complicated, it allowed his vermilion bird qi to advance by leaps and bounds. Yu Yu scolded her young disciple, saying that he was barely keeping up with her speed. She split apart and said that only by blocking that blow could he be considered approved. She attacked with everything she had and caused a huge explosion, sending the protagonist downward. Yu Yu became a little worried, seeing that she had messed up, because she had not held back and had ended up attacking far too hard. She looked down and called out to the protagonist, but Xiang appeared behind her, laughing, saying that had been very close because he had almost fallen from up there. He pointed out that the kick she had given was truly terrifying, and if qi had been added to it, he would not have survived. She looked at him very surprised. Ma Yao asked the protagonist to explain the scarlet bird wings of the scarlet bird divine art because when had he learned all of that? Xiang said that he had ended up learning it unintentionally over the past few days while training with Yu Yu, and that he had been planning to show the two of them someday. Mei Yao told Yu Yu that the protagonist's mind had been there the entire time and questioned why she had not noticed, because her mind was probably unstable. Xiang kept laughing, saying that to receive so much concern from Yu Yu, even if he had fallen off the cliff, it still would have been worth it. She became embarrassed by that, attacked the protagonist with everything she had, and told him to train for another 3 hours. A short time later, outside the city in the middle of the forest, the protagonist was testing his new wings. He pointed out that although those fire wings were convenient, they required extremely high control over qi, as well as a lot of practice and experience. While he was flying over the forest, he noticed noise and movement on the ground. 2 young men were fighting against a group of bandits. The protagonist recognized the flowing cloud sword art, and from the looks of it, those people were from the Xue family. One of the bandits managed to disarm one of the young men and pointed out that he did not care who he was. Suddenly, Xiang appeared and kicked one of the bandits in the face. The two breathed in relief, saying that this was very good because he had arrived just in time. Xiang looked at the bandits and asked if they really dared to rob guests of the Shen family because, from the looks of it, they were looking for death. After hearing that, the other bandits became worried and asked their leader what they should do. The leader stood up and pointed out that the protagonist was, at most, at the 6th level, so they could not accept that defeat. But Jiang began laughing and said that the 6th level was more than enough to destroy that trash. He released a little of his qi and said that now he had a good opportunity to test his white tiger whip. The bandits listened to their leader and charged at the protagonist, but he, excited, attacked all of them with impressive speed, defeating most of the bandits in a single movement. He looked at everyone and said that the leader knew those were guests of the Shen family, but even so, they dared to act, and from the looks of it, they were not bandits from that city. The leader took advantage of a supposed opening and attacked, asking why they needed to waste words, because they only needed to end it. But Xiang dodged the attack and counterattacked, saying that the leader was far too slow. With great pain and wounds all over his body, the leader shouted that he had underestimated that boy and that a prolonged fight was disadvantageous for them, so they needed to retreat immediately. Xiang returned to the ground and watched the bandits run away, while thinking that whenever he saw that situation, he felt those bandits were a little strange. The 2 young men went to the protagonist and thanked him for his help, asking if he was young Master Xiang of the Shen family. They introduced themselves, saying that their names were Xue Ming and Xue Zhiliang. Zhiliang said that his skills were lacking and that he had almost been defeated by those bandits. And if the news spread, It would bring shame to the entire Sue family. The protagonist pointed out that those people were probably not ordinary bandits. Ming became a little confused and asked what he was talking about. The protagonist explained that the leader of those bandits had at least 6th level strength. Because of that, he wanted to ask, in their opinion, how many 6th level bandits they thought existed in the entire southern martial nation, and whether that number would be enough for them to personally go out and rob people. Jiliang was surprised by that explanation and asked him to explain a little more what he really meant. Xiang said that, unfortunately, he still could not determine that for now, but no matter what happened, he would not let the two of them get hurt in the Shen family's territory. He invited the two of them to follow him. Ming pointed out that Jianxian's judgment really had been excellent. They pointed out that the protagonist not only possessed extraordinary strength, but was also extremely stronger than that martial artist from the Yao family. Xiang asked if they were talking about Tianhua. Ming said that the protagonist probably did not know, but Tianhua was very short and frail, and when he was little, he was often mistaken for a girl. Jiliang agreed, saying that even so, he still wanted to marry Xianxian because he was just a toad wanting to eat swan meat. Suddenly, a carriage passed in front of them, and they said that just as they spoke of the devil, he appeared. Suddenly, an attack came from inside the carriage and went toward the three of them, but the protagonist held the attack with his hands. The person inside used the same sound skill, questioning who the three of them were, and said that they needed to state their names quickly, otherwise they would no longer be polite. Xiang smiled, said his name and his family, and used the same sound skill to ask who they were and question how they dared to cause trouble inside that city. Tianhua slammed the table, irritated with the protagonist, and pointed out that he knew that carriage belonged to the Yao family, but even so, he dared to provoke them. The two stepped down from the carriage and ordered him to be cut down to the right size. Xiang looked at the two of them and said that, from the looks of it, that was Tianhua. He moved a little closer and said that, from the looks of it, he was young Master Yao, the famous alchemy genius. He apologized for not recognizing him. Tianhua was satisfied and thought that, from the looks of it, that guy also knew how to be humble. But the protagonist began mocking him, saying that it was a pity he was like a fragile willow swaying in the wind and needed a maid to help him out of the carriage. Jiliang and Ming began laughing, mocking the situation even more. Tianhua felt offended and became irritated, questioning what the protagonist meant because, from the looks of it, he was looking for trouble. Xiang pointed out that bullying the weak was not the Shen family style. He called Tianhua Miss and apologized, saying that he had ended up getting confused. Tianhua became so irritated that he charged forward, saying that the protagonist was being far too arrogant. Xiang realized that the movement showed that Tianhua was also at the 6th level. He dodged the attack and prepared to counterattack, questioning whether Tianhua really believed that, with that level of power, it was enough to put him in his place. Because if he wanted, he could watch carefully how to use a chi barrier. Suddenly, from inside the carriage, someone shouted using the sound skill, causing enormous pressure. The protagonist dodged the attack and became irritated, saying that, from the looks of it, the members of that idiotic family only knew how to launch sneak attacks. The man stepped down from the carriage, calling the protagonist a brat, and pointed out that he would not lower himself to attack someone like him. He warned the protagonist not to be happy, because that had only been a warning. That old man was the 7th elder of the Yao family. Ming said that family was truly shameless. Zhiliang agreed, saying that they had used a sneak attack. It had even been 2 against 1, and they still made it sound like something good. The 7th elder warned Tianhua that he was representing the entire family in that challenge, so he had to compete fairly and in the Yao family's manner. So what kind of decorum was it to get involved in a fight at will like that? Tianhua apologized to the 7th elder, saying that he was right. In addition, he told the protagonist that the Yao family's challenge letter should already have been delivered to the Shen family mansion. They would settle that on the training grounds. Xiang became irritated at being underestimated and used his sound skill to cause an explosion in the carriage. Tianhua asked the protagonist what he was trying to do. Xiang explained that he also knew that skill, and if the 7th elder was willing to discuss and exchange a few pointers, then naturally he should return the favor. The 7th elder became irritated and shouted at the protagonist, saying that he had better understand what he was doing. But Xiang simply ignored the two of them, saying that in 10 days they would meet again in the Shen family's martial arts arena. As soon as they returned home, the protagonist asked the two of them to go to the main courtyard for the banquet, because he still needed to get ready. The two agreed and said that he had to emerge victorious from the challenge no matter what. Xiang entered his room and said that this time he would settle everything. But Jianxian suddenly opened the door with force, hitting the protagonist in the face. She threw herself onto him and hugged him, saying that it had been a very long time since they had seen each other, and asked if he had missed her. Xiang, surprised, asked what she was doing there. She explained that she had heard about the challenge he was going to face, so she was there to cheer for him. She looked ahead with concentration and told him to wait a moment. Xiang already knew what would come next and, afraid, gently asked what had happened. Xianxian, extremely irritated, looked at him and said that she smelled a woman's perfume. She held him and slowly asked if he was hiding someone from her. The protagonist tried to get around the situation, pretending to cry and asking how that could happen, because recently some clan elders had gone there to visit him, so she was overthinking it. She smiled, a little calmer. Xiang thought that both Yu Yu and Mayao really were elders, so it was not exactly a lie. Xianxian asked the protagonist if he knew about martial arts sects. He questioned whether she was referring to the 8 great sects above the mortal martial realm, because he had heard that the lowest level among them was a master of the 9th mortal martial realm. Xianxian said that an elder from a martial arts sect wanted to meet him. However, he had emphasized that, for that to happen, the protagonist first had to overcome his current obstacle. Because of that, she wanted to confirm whether he could really defeat Tianhua. The protagonist hugged her and said that he promised he would definitely win. Xianxian, smiling, hugged him as well, saying that she already knew that because he was the best. Suddenly, she remembered that her father-in-law was now the current clan head, so she wanted to congratulate him personally. Xiang asked Yu Yu if he really could not tell even Xianxian about the existence of the two of them, because she was a good person. Yu Yu pointed out that the answer was very obvious, and that he should not do that because they were far too weak, and if any of their enemies found one of them, they would die without even having a grave. Mo Yao warned the protagonist that he should not lower his guard because, even if Tianhua's martial arts could not compare to his alchemy methods might still be just as good as the protagonist's. After all, he had already seen that his opponent could form a qi barrier like flames. Xiang ended up agreeing and said that, to win, he had to refine his control over the flames even further. Because of that, he could not waste any time. He opened the divine realm and entered once again. Ma Yao did not feel very comfortable with this, and warned the protagonist that his body might not be able to withstand the second trial. Xiang pointed out that he had no choice, because only this way could he improve quickly. He released his aura and the red bird prepared to attack him. He defended against the first attack and shouted that no matter how difficult that trial was, he would still pass. But as soon as he looked ahead, he was surprised, because it was a mountain range formed by Bifeng. Ma Yao said that the second stage was very simple. He needed to destroy that thing, called the Fire Vine of 1,000 Flames. The second stage finally began and the protagonist went all out, but as soon as he landed the first attack, he realized that nothing had happened. He noticed that the temperature was rising drastically and very quickly, so he ran away, saying that he was burning to death, because just touching that mountain made him feel as if his bones were burning. Mayao told the protagonist to stop being so foolish and questioned how long he was going to keep hitting it. He told her that he had been attacking that mountain with all his strength for an hour and questioned whether there really was a way to break it. She explained that the entire mountain was covered in Bifeng flames. Because of that, his attacks would not be effective until he got rid of those flames. She pointed out that the 1,000 Flames bath was the source of Bifeng's flames. So what he needed to do was dive into that volcano and absorb as much of the flames as possible with his own body, and only then would he be able to break that mountain. He was still a little confused by that explanation, and she said that the protagonist had felt that blow just now. Just by touching Bifeng's flames, his body had almost collapsed. She began to leave, saying that this was exactly why she had said that the second trial was far too early for him, so he needed to give up. But before she left, the protagonist released all his strength and said that this was only a low-level test. So how could he retreat before it? He jumped directly to the top of the volcano. He told Yu Yu that she had an ultimate yin body, so there had to be some way. Yu Yu pointed out that if she were at her peak, the mist she could form with a wave of her hand would be able to neutralize Bifeng's flames for him. But now the effect of her abilities was less than 1,000th, and the protection she could give the protagonist was extremely limited. Because of that, she asked if he was sure he wanted to enter that. Xiang said yes, because even without her help, he would still enter and complete the second phase of the test. He jumped into the volcano, saying that he had promised his beloved that he would win that dispute, because there was not the slightest possibility of handing her over to someone like that idiot Tianhua. He fell straight into the volcano's lava and began screaming. Ma Yao became worried about that boy. Sometime later, he began to emerge from inside the volcano, leaving the two of them surprised. With his body completely burned and surrounded by flames, he came out of the volcano's fire and shouted that it was finally the last step. Ma Yao told him that she had to admit his perseverance had once again exceeded her imagination, because he had soaked in the 1,000 Flames bath for 7 days straight, absorbing all the flames. Xiang, trembling, said that this was obvious, and pointed out that he would not retreat so easily. Ma Yao was still worried because even though the protagonist had managed to absorb all those flames, all his meridians and flesh were gravely damaged. Because of that, it was considered a miracle that he had not exploded and died, so she was not sure whether he could participate in the next competition. Still completely injured, he asked if it was all right now. Suddenly, his arm began to heal a little. He struck a rock, flames began to burst out and created a huge explosion, destroying the volcano, and with that, he passed. 10 days passed, and the day of the challenge finally arrived. Tianhua was already in the arena and the people were gathered, questioning where the protagonist was, and where he could have gone at a moment like that. The people, already impatient, questioned his father, who was the new clan head, asking if he had any news of his son. Tianhu explained that his son had gone to cultivate, but he did not know the exact location. However, he should already be returning. Tianhua once again acted arrogantly and questioned whether Jiang really did not dare to accept the challenge, and from the looks of it, the Shen family was truly ridiculous. His family should not have agreed to the wager that day, because that would have spared them from becoming such a huge joke in the southern martial nation. The people ended up agreeing, saying that, from the looks of it, the protagonist really would not dare to appear, because the young master of the Yao family had studied alchemy since childhood, while the protagonist had only just started, so there was no comparison. Jiang appeared on top of a house, saying that Yao Tianhua's talent was so mediocre that he could not think all the alchemists in the world were on his own level. Tianhua continued acting arrogantly, saying that, from the looks of it, the weakling had appeared. Jiang entered the arena, saying that it was obvious he would appear because such an important guest had gone to his home, so he needed to make him lose convincingly. The protagonist's father began laughing, seeing that, from the looks of it, his son's seclusion really had been a success. Xiang thought that this time it was all thanks to his two masters because, if it were not for them, he certainly would not have arrived in time. 3 days earlier, Ma Yao had been complaining, calling the protagonist a brat because she did not know he was surprisingly heavy. Suddenly, the protagonist regained consciousness and called out to his master. She was surprised, seeing that he could still wake up, which showed that the boy's spirit was truly good. Xiang began to move, asking where they were. Yu shouted at him not to move, because his flesh and meridians had not withstood 7 days and 7 nights of tempering by the flames, and now his body was completely ruined and his meridians were extremely unstable. The protagonist refused to stay still, saying that he still had the competition, so he needed to return immediately. Yu said that he could barely stand at that moment, but if he forcefully circulated his qi, his meridians would rupture, and he could lose his life. However, she explained that the flames he had absorbed contained a new vital energy, and to pacify it, he had to continuously infuse them with an opposing force to neutralize it inside his own body. Because of that, he should consider himself very lucky, because there was indeed a place in that mortal martial world that met the criteria for that. Ma Yao asked him to try guessing where it was. The protagonist said that the opposite of life was death, so they were going to the immortal demon pool. Ma Yao explained that the death energy of the immortal demon well could help the protagonist neutralize the flames and accelerate the recovery of his body and meridians. The protagonist asked if she was really saying what he was thinking. Ma Yao took that opportunity to get revenge for all the anger she had been feeling and threw him into the water, saying that he needed to soak for 3 days. Back in the present, the protagonist thought that soaking in the immortal demon pool for 3 days had not only healed his injuries, but had also forged an immortal demon body, which meant that this could be considered a blessing in disguise. He pointed at the 7th elder, saying that it was time to stop having side conversations, and said that his wager was a 1,000-year 9-leaf lotus and an infernal spiritual mushroom. The elder said that he did not need to worry about that because the Yao family's wager was a 1,000-year beast core and a 1,000-pattern fruit. The people were surprised, seeing that both sides were offering extremely precious treasures, which meant they were giving it their all. The judge announced that the alchemy furnaces of both sides had been inspected, and that they could now officially begin the alchemy competition. Tianhua prepared to begin and told the protagonist that he would be trampled. But Jiang also began using his alchemy, saying that he would very much like to see that happen. 2 hours later, they were still steady and strong in their alchemy. Tianhua said that his process was refined and finished. He took 5 yuan spiritual pills from inside the furnace. The judge said that the genius of the rival family truly lived up to his reputation. Another person said that those pills were the most technically challenging among low-grade elixirs, so that boy from the Shen family would definitely lose. The protagonist smiled and said that his was also about to be ready. Tianhua looked at the protagonist and said that he was being extremely slower, so he should not be smiling. Jiang prepared to open his furnace and asked his opponent not to speak too soon. He showed 3 marrow cleansing pills, a medium-grade elixir, and because of that, the judges could evaluate them if they wanted. Tianhua was surprised by that, and an elder questioned what kind of joke he was making now. The judge examined them carefully and was surprised, saying that those really were marrow-cleansing pills and that their quality was above the mortal level. Everyone was surprised, asking if those were really marrow-cleansing pills since the protagonist was only 16 years old, so how could that be possible? Tianhu held the members of his family, telling them to go see it. Hanhai looked at the pill and pointed out that he had not known the protagonist had so much power at that age. The protagonist's father kept smiling, saying that, from the looks of it, the result of that competition had already been decided. The elder was extremely furious about that. Tianhua also could not believe it and questioned on what grounds that country bumpkin had managed to do that. The protagonist approached the two of them, saying that a wager was still a wager, so they needed to hand over the items immediately. The seventh elder could not accept such humiliation, and Tianhua noticed that. The seventh elder thought that Tianhua had to act because the entire family was supporting him. The seventh elder brought the items, saying that, as promised, the family's 1,000-year beast core and 1,000-pattern fruit would be handed over, because he would not go back on his word. The protagonist, who was about to take his reward, said that this time he had really hit the jackpot, but Tianhua tried to launch a sneak attack with the light and shadow step. He moved quickly, splitting his body into 3 parts, and shouted, asking who had said that only alchemy was being contested, and that now the protagonist would pay for his arrogance. Xiang took a deep breath, thinking that this was already getting very boring. Tianhua warned that it was an honor for anyone to be eliminated by the Yao family's ultimate skill. Xiang moved extremely fast and with impressive ease landed an attack on his opponent's head, asking if he was already tired of playing around. Tianhua asked how that was possible and how his true body had been found. Xiang pointed out that the movement was indeed an ultimate skill of the Yao family, but he became irritated and began releasing his power, creating a terrifying aura. He grabbed Tianhua, saying that he was full of holes and could not even make his true qi flow evenly, so it would be strange if he could not find the true body. Tianhua kept acting arrogantly, calling the protagonist scum, and ordered him to stop immediately. Xiang lifted Tianhua, saying that this time he would completely crush those sneaky thoughts. He used the violent true fire killing fist and sent Tianhua flying away. He fell unconscious to the ground and the people became worried. The elder shouted at the protagonist, saying that he would like to warn him that there was a price to pay for doing something wrong. Xiang simply turned his back, saying that it was that family of idiots who had launched a sneak attack, and now it was still the same family that could not afford to lose. And if they wanted to play dirty, then he would gladly accept whatever price he had to pay. The seventh elder entered the arena, saying that now he would come teach a true lesson to an arrogant brat like him. Hanhai became irritated by that and said that the protagonist could not win, so they needed to enter a relay battle because that family was truly a disgrace. Zhenhua mocked Hanhai, saying that back then, the two of them had also fought a relay battle. Hanhai explained that in the clan head election, Tianhu and Xiang had won fairly, and they had accepted that wholeheartedly. But now the protagonist was the hope of the family, and they needed to do something. Because of that, he offered to enter the arena because they could not let anything happen. But Tianhu asked him not to be so hasty because they could observe first. Xianxian appeared calm and happy, asking them not to worry. They were surprised and asked when she had arrived. Xianxian simply said that her man could easily defeat that trash. The seventh elder tried to attack the protagonist, but he dodged easily and counterattacked. The seventh elder also dodged and told the protagonist that he already knew his palm strikes carried internal force, but that would only be effective if he could land a hit. Xiang became irritated because he had not expected that old man to be so agile, but he needed to deal with him before his qi ran out. Suddenly, he felt something strange inside his stomach and questioned why his dantian felt strange. The seventh elder advanced quickly, saying that the protagonist's left abdomen had been injured by Tianhua, but he was pretending to be fine and enduring it until now. Xiang managed to defend against the first attack, but the old man was prepared and attacked with his other hand. Everyone became worried and asked the clan head to interrupt that match immediately, since Xiang was the hope of the Shen family, and they absolutely could not let anything happen to him. Tianhu noticed that his son's aura was a little strange. Xianxian, who was still very calm, told her father-in-law that she had also noticed it. But unfortunately, the opponent's cultivation level was far too low. The seventh elder kept laughing, saying that the protagonist's left abdomen had previously been injured by the shadow of light, and now he had been struck by the burning sun palm. The protagonist said nothing, only stood there, with his body trembling. The seventh elder continued, saying that after the properties of those two injuries combined, the protagonist's meridians would be destroyed by the impact. Xiang continued acting strangely and touched the elder, who was saying that the protagonist would become crippled again. Jiang began to smile and asked if all of that was true, then opened his clothes, asking the old man to look more closely and show where the wound was. The seventh elder was surprised and asked how there could only be the scars of the burning sun palm. Xiang said that if he had not acted a little strange, then how could he have induced his opponent to reveal a weakness? The seventh elder became worried. The protagonist released all of his tiger aura, and the old man shouted for the protagonist to release him immediately. Xiang told the seventh elder that he had just attacked with a palm strike, and according to the rules he himself had created, it should be repaid 100 times stronger. He used his killing fist technique, sinking the seventh elder into the ground. The elder was completely defeated on the ground, and the protagonist asked if he had given up yet because he still owed 33 punches. Xianxian entered the arena and asked the protagonist to stop. With a smile on her face, she threw a pill to the elder, saying that it could help him recover quickly. Xiang was confused and asked what she really was. The elder looked up, and she laughed, saying that it would not be very fun if someone died. She pointed out that after taking that pill, he could recover 5 or 6/10 in an instant. She approached the protagonist and said that, judging by the time, he should be almost fully recovered, so the protagonist could continue the fight now. The seventh elder stood up, frightened, and Jiang prepared to continue fighting, saying that this was just as expected of his beloved because she truly understood his heart. Jiang went back to beating the seventh elder a little more, and everyone turned their backs, pretending they had not seen anything. While the elder was being carried away on a stretcher, he shouted at the protagonist that both he and his family would not be forgiven by the Yao family. He pointed out that from then on, in every elixir shop owned by the Yao family, no one from the Shen family would be allowed to buy even a single pill. Xiang questioned whether an elder really believed he could monopolize all the elixirs in the southern martial nation. Xianxian kept laughing and held the protagonist's arm, saying that he was completely right and called him back to his room with her so she could apply medicine to his injuries. As soon as they reached the entrance of the room, the protagonist said that, earlier, she had mentioned wanting to introduce a senior expert to him. Xianxian laughed, saying that this person was right there. Suddenly, an extremely powerful and oppressive aura appeared, and the protagonist became more surprised the closer that person got. But he felt pressured, because his body seemed to be controlled involuntarily, wanting to kneel before her. So who exactly was this person? The woman explained that under her royal authority, anyone below the ninth realm would feel immense pressure and bow down. The protagonist felt as if his internal organs were about to explode, which meant that woman was at least in the ninth realm or above, and even if he used all his strength, he would barely be able to scratch her. The woman came even closer and asked what the protagonist would do. She said that he had two options, either kneel humbly or die tragically with his dignity intact. Xiang remained standing, refusing with all his strength to kneel, because he believed he should not do that, since he only knelt before his parents or his closest relatives. Xianxian tried to interfere, but the woman told her to stay quiet. The protagonist thought that even if she was a powerful martial artist, he had no reason to kneel before her. The woman told Xianxian that she knew very well what she was doing. Xianxian simply agreed and stayed silent. Xiang also began releasing his aura, saying that yin and yang were in harmony, all things were still, spiritual energy coexisted, and the soul of life was undivided. At that moment, the protagonist completely repelled the royal authority, leaving the woman surprised because she had been completely neutralized by that strange qi. A bit of qi went toward her and she deflected it with only one finger, apologizing for hitting the roof of a house. After refusing to kneel, the protagonist sat on the ground, exhausted, and the woman said that it was fine because he had passed. Jiang showed respect, saying that she was probably the expert Xianxian had mentioned earlier, so he would like to know if all that oppressive force had been a trial. The woman was pleased, saying that from the looks of it, the protagonist was quite sharp and had good potential, much stronger than the so-called genius of the Yao family. Xianxian became angry with the woman, saying that she had been scared to death because the woman had said she would not intimidate the protagonist and called the woman master. Jiang shouted in surprise at that. The two entered his room and he hurriedly brought some tea for them. Xianxian explained that she had been a little afraid of distracting the protagonist from the competition, so she had not told him before. She explained that some time ago she had passed an admission test for a martial arts sect, and now that woman was her master, who was there to take her away. The protagonist thought that martial arts sects were a world beyond the normal world. He remembered that earlier the senior had said that within her ability, everyone below the 9th level would be affected by her royal authority. The senior said that his guess was correct and explained that Xianxian was already in the 9th realm of mortal martial arts, and with her talent, following her teachings, she would probably reach the true martial realm within half a year. The protagonist was impressed by that and went to her, saying that he had not expected she was already turning into a transcendent master. Jianxian also became excited, saying that she would become a heroine in the end. Xiang looked at the master and said that Jianxian was truly very lucky to cultivate under her guidance. So he wanted to ask the senior to take very good care of her in the future. The woman told the protagonist that she knew he was thinking that, although the true martial realm seemed distant, with all the potential he had shown, along with the strange qi she could not understand, with practice and focus, it was not impossible for him to reach it. Because of that, if he managed to reach the ninth realm, he would be able to meet his beloved again. Xianxian had previously thought that the person she worried about most was the protagonist himself, but from the looks of it, now even her master had acknowledged him, so there was no need for her to worry. She threw herself into his arms again, saying that he had to give his best to find her as quickly as possible. Xiang smiled and told her not to worry because he promised that as soon as his cultivation reached the ninth martial realm, he would immediately go find her. The master opened a portal and said that they could not stay in the mortal world for too long. When the time came, the protagonist could go to the divine weapon celestial realm to find her. Before passing through the portal, Jianxian called out to the protagonist and became a little hesitant, but he encouraged his future wife, telling her to go in peace, because he would soon come back to bring her home. Jianxian smiled and said that she would wait for him as long as necessary. As soon as she entered, the portal closed. The protagonist looked at his hands and pointed out that he had not expected the distance between him and her to already be so great, so he needed to work even harder. Sometime later, inside a room, there was some money on the table, and the protagonist told his father that their family could not have only that much family property left. His father explained that, regarding money, there was no problem as long as it was circulating. He pointed out that after the conflict with the Yao family, they had completely cut off all sources of medicinal herbs for the Shen family. And without medicinal herbs, it would be difficult for the younger generations of the family to improve. The hallmaster said that there were 2 alchemists within that family, and medicinal herbs were not exclusive to the Yao family. As long as there was an alchemist, they could start over in the royal city because no one cared about the opinion of that idiotic family. The protagonist was surprised and asked the pavilion master why he was there. The pavilion master asked him to completely stop calling him that because, based on seniority, he should be his ancestor. Xiang became irritated by that and asked the old man if he was really there, only to take advantage of the situation. The pavilion master became irritated and asked the protagonist's father to control his son immediately. Tianhu punished his son, ordering him to apologize to the family uncle immediately. The ancestor said that this situation was not that important because it was understandable that the protagonist did not recognize him. After all, back then, the protagonist's grandfather and he had fought fiercely for the position of patriarch. However, he had decided never to interfere in the Shen family's affairs again. Xiang told the elder that not only had he not cared, he had also forbidden the alchemist from teaching him, which meant that he must still hold a grudge against the Shen family. The pavilion master asked the protagonist to let the past stay in the past, because now the Shen family had a new patriarch, and a talent like the protagonist had appeared among the younger generation. So how could he keep clinging to past grudges? Besides, the Yao family had gone too far, and it was time to do something for the Shen family. Tianhu asked if the elder was planning something, because he had just mentioned going to the royal city. The elder said that was exactly right because he was planning to open an alchemy pavilion in the royal city. Tianhu became worried and warned his uncle that there were many powerful factions in the royal city, so he and his son would encounter many obstacles when opening the shop. The hallmaster asked him not to worry because his name, Shen Luzong, was somewhat known in the alchemy world of the southern martial nation. In addition, he had also accumulated some connections and resources over the years. He warned the protagonist that he would go to the royal city first to prepare some matters, and he could go after his injuries healed. Luzong pointed out that with the strength of the 2 of them, grandfather and grandson together, they would definitely establish a foundation in the royal city and bring prosperity to the Shen family. The protagonist began to smile and asked if he had just gained a grandfather out of nowhere. 2 weeks later, in the royal city, Xiang finally arrived and was surprised, saying that this was just as expected of the royal city, because if he could establish a position there, his family would never have to worry about medicinal resources again. He saw a commotion happening right in front of him and thought that his great-uncle had told him to go straight to South Celestial Street, but he did not know if he was going the right way. He looked at a person beside him and asked what everyone was looking at. The man pointed out that they were only watching the city lord's 3rd son taking things. The protagonist asked who that person was, and another young man approached, saying that it was exactly what he had heard, but that was not all because that boy was also the head of Danxiang Pharmacy, and they did not know how that Lingden Pavilion had caused trouble with that noble, but it was a tragedy. However, no matter what it was fun to watch. The protagonist approached and saw the shop's signboard thrown on the ground. He heard some noises coming from upstairs. Lu Zong was questioning the third young master about what he thought he was doing. He was the third son of the city lord named Hua Xin. Hua Xin told Lu Zong to ask his people what they had done, asked the old man to look at his wound, and pointed out that he could barely stand up now. In the current position he was in, he was already being merciful by not tearing off one of Lu Zong's legs. The old man's subordinate asked his master how he could have injured him. Lu Zong asked his subordinate not to say anything else because he already understood the whole situation. Hua Xin continued saying that he was not an unreasonable person and pointed out again that they had injured the prince's leg, so he wanted the entire shop. The protagonist picked up a stone and, irritated, threw it hard at Hua Xin's leg. He stood up angrily and asked who the idiot was who dared to sneak attack him. The guards were frightened, saying that the movement had been far too fast and that perhaps the opponent was a master, so they needed to protect the third young master. The protagonist entered saying that the injured person was probably the third young master. He asked if his leg was not gravely injured, so how had he managed to stand up so quickly? Hua Xin and his guards were surprised by that, but the young master went up to the protagonist and asked if he had really tried to assassinate him. He ordered his guards to seize him immediately. Jiang released his aura and said that they could try to capture him whenever they wanted. Hua Xin looked at one of his guards who was trembling in fear and asked if he was going deaf, because he had given the order for them to attack that boy. Xiang pointed out that, from the looks of it, the guards had a little sense, unlike their idiot master. The guard explained to the third young master that that person's true qi was extremely piercing and frightening, so it was better not to act rashly. Hua Xin remained irritated and struck his own guard, telling him to get out of there, since he was nothing but useless. He also released his aura, saying that the protagonist was nothing but a brat from the countryside, so he would receive a lesson now. Hua Xin shouted that he would demonstrate his lightning rain, but before he could do anything, the protagonist advanced quickly and grabbed him by the neck. The young master was frightened, asking who the hell the protagonist was and what he wanted. Xiang warned that Hua Xin had injured his grandfather, destroyed his entire shop, and now wanted to know what others wanted. The young master looked at the protagonist and asked if that shop belonged to him, but Xiang remained irritated and tightened his grip around the young master's throat even more. Hua Xin asked him to wait because his father was the city lord, and if the protagonist wanted to do business, they could discuss some things. Xiang said that this was exactly it because that boy was the city lord's son and the shopkeeper of Danxiang Pharmacy, which meant there were great powers behind him. Hua Xin began acting arrogantly again, saying that it was good to know the protagonist understood that, so he should stop immediately. Jiang slapped the young master across the face, and he was surprised, questioning how he had the courage to do that because not even his father had ever laid a hand on his face. Ashamed by that, he shouted, calling the protagonist a bastard, and ordered him to kneel immediately and beg for mercy because if he did it properly, then perhaps his pathetic life would be spared. But Xiang simply slapped the young master across the face again. The protagonist kept looking at him, saying that he was only an abandoned child and should not think too highly of himself. Xiang moved a little closer and said that even he, an outsider, knew that the Hua family of Wohu City was very famous for the thunder and twilight rain technique, but Hua Xin could only use the lower level of it. Although he was the city lord's son, he had been placed as the pharmacy's shopkeeper. With a position like that, he was already useless in his own father's eyes. Xiang smiled and asked if he understood now. Besides, even if the Hua family stood up for a useless person like Hua Xin, the question he should ask himself was whether they really wanted to cause trouble with two alchemists from Lingdan Pavilion. Hua Xin, with tears in his eyes, said that it was not like that. One of the women there pointed out that no one in that city knew all of that. However, the city lord had decided to make it very clear, and that young man, besides punishing the young master, wanted to damage his heart. Jiang asked Hua Xin to get out of there immediately because if he still wanted to cause trouble, then he would no longer be as polite as he had been so far. Hua Xin began crying, saying that he did not want that anymore, and pointed out that his father was very influential because once he saw that Hua Xin was not talented, he gave all the resources to his eldest brother and second brother. The entire Wohu city knew that the third son of the Hua family was a loser, and everyone made jokes about him. While crying, he grabbed the protagonist's leg, saying that he did not want to go through all of that anymore and asked what he should do to improve. Xiang asked the third young master to calm down a little and let go of him. Tianhua's subordinate said something to him. The old man went to the protagonist and warned him that they had just received news. The owner of Danxiang Pharmacy and her older brother, the young lord of the city, Hua Lei, had brought many people to that side, so perhaps it was already over for that third young master. The protagonist pointed out that they could not mess with the pharmacy or the city lord at the moment. Hua Xin kept crying, saying that the protagonist and his grandfather were talented alchemists and children of heaven who had been cultivated by their families since childhood. So it was very obvious that they could not understand what he was really going through. That made Jiang irritated, and he called the third young master. The protagonist released a little qi in his hand, and Hua Xin was frightened, asking if he was going to be beaten again. Xiang said that was not it, because he only wanted to say that he also understood what it was like to be ignored by the family and treated as a loser by everyone. The young master was confused and asked what the protagonist was talking about. Xiang introduced himself and said his name, saying that he had been a loser in the Shen family for years, and that he could ask anyone he wanted, but fortunately his father had always supported him and had not given up. So, in the end, he had managed to change his own fate. Because of that, the protagonist wanted to make a proposal. He went up to the young master and asked if he would like to work together and remove the title of loser, because no one wanted to be trash for the rest of their life. Hua Xin was so moved that he began crying, asking if that proposal was really true. Xiang smiled and said yes, because he never joked about that kind of thing. Lu Zong asked the protagonist if he was sure about what he was doing, because the other side was very aggressive. Xiang asked his uncle not to worry about that. Outside, a man arrived on horseback, ordering the guards to seize the troublemaker for him immediately. He was the young lord of Wohu City. He looked back, asking Master Hua not to worry because he would put on a satisfying show for her. But she simply stayed quiet, observing the situation. The young man ordered all the guards to attack, but an extremely powerful dragon-shaped aura came out from inside the house, sending the 3 guards who had advanced flying away. The protagonist asked what the problem was. He came outside holding one of the guards, saying that thieves were repeatedly trying to invade his pavilion and cause trouble, and questioned whether there were no guards in that city who could do their job. The young lord of the city asked the protagonist who he was and pointed out that he had seriously injured his third brother, as well as the city guards standing before him. He asked if the protagonist knew the punishments for those crimes. Jiang asked if that meant he was the young lord of the Hua family's city. The protagonist became irritated and threw the guard to the ground, telling the young lord that his brother had destroyed the pavilion for no reason, and his guards had also broken into his private residence for no reason. Because of that, he would also like to know what punishments the third young master and the guards would receive for doing that. The young lord felt humiliated, asked the protagonist what he meant by that, and charged forward, asking how he dared to provoke the grandeur of the Hua family. Because of that, he would show him the consequences of such actions. The guards were frightened, saying that they needed to run, because the young lord of the city was furious. But Xiang also did not have much patience and advanced quickly, moving behind the young lord. However, the young lord disappeared, and the protagonist was surprised, retreating and questioning where he was. Suddenly, his opponent appeared flying toward him, saying that with that light and smoke, he only needed one strike, because that was the Hua family's greatest skill, the Heavenly Thunderstorm. The attack went toward the protagonist, but he used the White Tiger Golden Shield. The young lord kept attacking, saying that when the hammer and lightning joined together, the opponent would have no way to escape. Xiang, who was trying to withstand the attack with his shield, realized that he would not be able to hold on for much longer, and suddenly his shield shattered. A huge explosion happened, but Yang was still standing as if nothing had happened, leaving the young lord surprised by that. The protagonist looked at his completely damaged clothes and pointed out that the power of the White Tiger Golden Shield was still not enough, and that if he had known that a little earlier, he would not have listened to Mayao. She scolded her disciple, saying that he was nothing but a brat because he himself had said that he wanted to learn everything, so he could not be so greedy. The young lord returned to the ground and told the protagonist that he was very lucky to remain intact after blocking his move. Xiang said that was not quite right and that luck was not what had kept him standing. The young lord told him not to be so conceited because now he would have to suffer a little. However, the protagonist was dodging all the attacks with some ease. He thought that moments earlier he had detected a slight difference between the timing of each lightning strike, but now it was his turn to play. He dodged the last blow and landed a punch, sending the young lord flying away. He became even more furious and shouted at the protagonist that if he dared to face him inside that city, he had better think about the consequences he would face in the future. Master Hua restrained him and asked him not to be so angry. She stepped out of the carriage, saying that the two were talented young alchemists of the southern martial nation. So why should they fight there? She kept approaching and said that the two of them could consider her a little and shake hands to make peace, asking what young master Shen Xiang thought of that. The protagonist was surprised and asked how she knew him. She said that of course she would know him because the match between young master Shen and the Yao family had already spread throughout the entire city, and everyone knew about it. Yueyun pointed out that the protagonist was a young hero, but the matter of Tianhua losing to him could affect the Yao family's cooperation in the city, and asked what the young master thought of that. The young lord thought that she knew very well that he had contact with the Yao family, and perhaps that girl was trying something. Yue Yun showed a chest full of gold. Xiang was surprised, asking if all of that was really for him. Yue Yun explained that the third young master was the pharmacy's shopkeeper, and his mistakes were also everyone's mistakes. So they wanted to rid themselves of that guilt. Xiang became confused and looked at his grandfather, thinking about that woman. Luzong said that it was very good to understand and pointed out that woman could not deceive him, so the protagonist did not need to worry because he would deal with her. Xiang became happy and surprised, saying that his grandfather was a reliable old man. He held her hands, saying that Master Hua was far too good for someone so young, and it was no wonder she could hold such an important position even at such a young age. She tried to restrain herself and thanked him for the words of praise. Lu Song continued acting strangely, saying that they should consider the overall situation first and recover greatly. The protagonist looked at that situation and thought that he had greatly overestimated that old man. The young lord pointed out that his third younger brother had been injured, so this was a matter of the family's honor, and he demanded a proper explanation for everything that had happened. Hua Xin, who was watching everything from a window, became moved, saying that his older brother was not like his father, because from the looks of it, he still cared about what happened. Jiang explained that the third young master was fine. However, from the looks of it, the young lord was not afraid of accidentally injuring him if he used the heavenly thunderstorm there. The young lord said no, because his brother knew very well that he was a useless person, since he could not do anything well. So he brought nothing but trouble to the family, and even if he was injured by mistake, that was better than being humiliated there. The protagonist realized that his plan was unfolding correctly. The third young master appeared running, saying that he was very useful. He held the protagonist's hand and, crying, told him that the heavenly pill he had given him really was very good, because besides the trauma he had just suffered, even the damage caused by his defective kidney had been resolved. Xiang smiled and explained that while he was treating the third young master, he had also taken the opportunity to cure some small illnesses. Hua Xin asked one of his guards to inform the Spring Breeze house to prepare the girls because he would reserve the alley that night. He looked at his brother and asked if he would like to join the fun, but the young lord was irritated by that situation. Hua Xin pointed out that if his brother did not want to attend, that was fine because he would enjoy himself alone. The protagonist asked the young lord if he had seen all of that. The young man left, saying that they were a lost cause. Lu Song pointed out that he had not expected that, but in the end, the third young master had ended up saving them. However, he noticed that the protagonist was acting strangely and asked his grandson if he had planned all of that. Because from the looks of it, Jiang had made the third young master aware of his position in the family and then took the opportunity to win him over. The protagonist only smiled, saying that it was a true mystery, but now at least the entire city knew one thing. The Shen family's Pill King Pavilion was officially open. A little farther from the city, in the middle of the mountains, Maya was enjoying that place, because she had not expected such a good place to exist in that mortal world, since spiritual energy was abundant, and her entire body felt much more comfortable. Yu Yu laughed and told her younger sister that she was sure she could not stay in that ring space for very long. Mayao laughed and said that the two of them were in the same boat. The protagonist appeared relieved because the efficiency of cultivating dragon saliva there was truly much greater. The nearby flowers and herbs had been affected by the effect of the dragon saliva, and at that pace he was sure that in 3 months he would be able to have the golden spiritual fruit, which would normally take 1,000 years to mature. Suddenly, someone shouted at the protagonist not to pick that and threw an axe. He dodged the attack. A group of people approached, and the leader said that he was the one who had discovered those herbs, so they could not take them. Mayao, bothered by that situation, pointed out that those men had made her lose her appetite, so she ordered the brat to teach them a good lesson. Yu Yu stated that they needed to be gentle with those men, so it would be better to break their skulls and spread their blood all over the ground. Xiang was surprised and asked how that could be gentle. The group leader asked if they really did not know who they were, so how did they dare steal the herbs there? The protagonist looked at the boss and realized that he had seen him before because it was definitely that guy. The boss asked if they were not hearing what he was saying. The protagonist also acted quickly and moved behind his opponent, slamming his head into the ground. He said that 2 months ago they were the mountain bandits in Wohu City, so why had they now become herb collectors? The boss became a little confused and asked what the protagonist was talking about. Xiang told the boss that if he really did not want to speak, then he would have to use his White Tiger Thunder Whip. He tied up the boss, struck him with lightning, and then threw him hard into a rock. After receiving the attack, the bandit chief pointed out that now he remembered that Qi was unmistakable and the protagonist was the young master of the Shen family. Xiang, who was already irritated by that situation, began approaching the bandit chief and ordered him to identify himself immediately and say why he had pretended to be a bandit before. The man bowed and said that his name was Wei Dazhuang and that he was only an herb collector of the Wei family, normally responsible for supplying medicinal materials to the Yao family. The protagonist asked if he really worked for the Yao family. Dazhuang said yes. The protagonist continued questioning whether he was the one who had disturbed the Shen family banquet. Dazhuang explained that the seventh elder of the Yao family had instructed him to do that. Yu pointed out that she had already expected that because, just from his appearance, that old seventh elder had looked very strange. Xiang said that if that was the case, then he needed to start with Dazhuang because he wanted to settle both new and old grudges. Dazhuang became frightened and begged for mercy, telling the protagonist that he had been forced to do it and that if he was spared, he promised to help the protagonist deal with the Yao family. But Xiang continued imposing all of his authority, and Dazhuang said that Yao Tianhua was on his way to Dongping City. After receiving that information, the protagonist restrained himself a little. He went to the city and a carriage was moving at full speed. The man driving the carriage shouted for the protagonist to get out of the way and questioned whether he did not know that this was the Yao family's carriage. But as soon as Yang heard that the carriage belonged to that family, he charged forward with everything he had and split the carriage in half, saying that he was looking for Tianhua. The seventh elder felt the true qi and quickly realized that it belonged to the protagonist, asking what he was doing there. Xiang began approaching the two of them, releasing his murderous aura, and asked the elder why he did not ask himself that question. Because if he did not want people to know what he was doing, then he should not have done it. Tianhua told the seventh elder to stop talking nonsense and quickly teach the protagonist a lesson. The seventh elder pointed out that the boy's qi was a little strange and that he would probably need to take that strengthening pill. Xiang pointed out that he already knew the two of them had no shame at all, but that was fine because they could settle that situation altogether. Tianhua and the seventh elder began attacking at the same time. After taking the strengthening pill, the seventh elder's body became several times larger, and releasing his power, he used the burning sun palm, causing a huge explosion of fire. The two stood still, unable to see Xiang, and questioned whether the attack had worked. The seventh elder said that Bastard had probably been blown up, leaving not even dust behind. But in the middle of the dust, the protagonist began saying that in only 2 months, the Shadow Mirage sword attack had gained the power of the 7th level, and that was just as expected of the Yao family genius. But unfortunately, the protagonist pointed out that he had progressed even faster. Tianhua and the 7th elder could not believe how that was possible. The protagonist attacked, saying that now it was his turn to play a little. He tied the two of them up with a whip and began crushing them as if they were nothing. The 7th elder questioned what the protagonist really wanted and whether it was possible that he wanted to eliminate the two of them. Tianhua kept saying that if he did that, then the Yao family would never spare him, and he could wait for the extermination of his entire family. Xiang said that Ma Yao had told him that the White Tiger martial skill used combat to increase its power, but sometimes blood was also necessary. He kept squeezing the two of them tighter and tighter, until only a red puddle remained beneath their fallen bodies, because the two of them had received exactly what they deserved. A short time later at the pavilion, Dazhuang appeared and told his new young master that they had just brought the medicinal materials he had requested. Xiang asked his subordinate to help unload the goods and asked Dazhuang to sit for a while and taste some tea. Dazhuang warned the protagonist that there was a lot of talk outside because they said Tianhua's carriage had disappeared and even his body had not been found. Xiang questioned what he meant by that. Dazhuang became frightened and apologized, telling the protagonist that he knew nothing because he only knew that the Yao family had disappeared, and now it was the opportunity of the Pill King Pavilion. Xiang became happy and said that this was a good opportunity, so he would leave the medicinal materials for Dazhuang to take care of. Dazhuang asked his new boss not to worry because he would work in the best way possible. He breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that he had been very lucky not to choose the wrong side, otherwise his body might have disappeared too. Luzong burst through the door and asked the protagonist why he had called him back in such a hurry and what the problem was. Xiang asked his grandfather to accompany him because he had a treasure to show him. Luzong asked what kind of treasure it was because he could not be acting so mysterious. The protagonist placed a box on the table and asked his grandfather to open it. Luzong said that if the protagonist had made him leave the Spring Breeze house for some trash or to talk about business, he would pay with his own life. But as soon as the old man opened the chest, the light and energy from it filled the place. He asked if that really was the 1,000-year divine fruit, the golden spiritual fruit. He held the fruits in his hands, saying that those things needed 1,000 years to become a tree and 1,000 years to bear fruit. In addition, whether it was the peels or the leaves, they had enormous benefits for refining high-quality pills, making them a treasure coveted by everyone in the world of alchemy. Xiang asked his grandfather if he was drunk, because he was speaking a little too slowly. The old man asked the protagonist where he had gotten those fruits. Xiang explained that he had used a special method to obtain that golden spiritual fruit. He thought that the effects of the dragon saliva technique were even more incredible than he had imagined, and it was no wonder Ma Yao had warned him not to mention it to anyone. The protagonist changed the subject, asking his grandfather if he could keep those golden spiritual fruits, because the Pill King Pavilion had just opened, so he would use them to recruit people and strengthen the pavilion's power. Luzong said that with those things as bait, all the best alchemists of the Southern Martial Empire would probably want to join them. As soon as they began recruiting, several people gathered in front of the pavilion, saying that they would like to take the test, and some of them were even looking for trouble, telling everyone not to cut in line, because if they could not get the job, they could at least smell the golden spiritual fruit, since they only wanted to take a look at something so rare. Luzong looked at the whole situation and told his grandson that now they really did not need to worry about people. But suddenly someone arrived asking who was in charge of that place and ordered everyone else to get out of the way. The man went to the entrance and looked at the sign saying Pill King Pavilion and ordered them to change that name immediately because they did not deserve it. Xiang went outside and, irritated, asked if that old man had nothing better to do, questioning what the problem was with the name Pill King Pavilion. The man said that he was the Pill King, and both the grandfather and the protagonist became irritated by that situation. The two continued staring at each other. The old man held the profound Yang furnace. Xiang said that, from the looks of it, he was Uncle Mengbo of the Southern Martial Empire. Not only was he extremely skilled in alchemy, but he also had the iconic profound Yang furnace. In the hands of ordinary people, it was only a high-quality alchemy furnace, but in reality, it was a dragon-level sacred weapon. Mengbo asked if they were dazzled by it because, now that they knew everything, they could change the sign immediately. Ma Yao appeared, asking if he was not ashamed to call himself the Pill King with only that level. She looked at the protagonist and said that even for him, Xiang could not afford to lose to a guy like that. The protagonist asked if she was serious, and she said yes, because that furnace was a great treasure. The protagonist was probably also feeling the incredible sensation emanating from it. So if he could take it, everything would be great. Xiang understood exactly what he needed to do and said that if that was the case, then they could compete. Mengbo was surprised and questioned whether the protagonist could really compete with him. Xiang said that if he happened to lose, then he would change the sign and the name of the pavilion, in addition to giving him a golden spiritual fruit. But if he won, then… Luzong interrupted his grandson and said a few things to him. The protagonist asked his grandfather if he really needed that furnace, because that was an old man who only had one furnace, and if he lost, the poor man would have nothing left. But Mengbo was enchanted by the possibility of obtaining a golden divine fruit. He began laughing, saying that in that case he would bet his own furnace, but that was exactly what the protagonist had wanted from the beginning. Luzong stepped in and said that, to be fair, the protagonist would use his furnace in that competition, and asked if Mengbo had any problem with that. Mengbo explained that he naturally believed in the reputation of the master of the Pill King Pavilion. However, the protagonist questioned his grandfather about why he should use his furnace. Luzong took out his furnace for the protagonist, saying that he would know why later. Luzong's furnace flew into the sky, became several times larger, and fell to the ground. He pointed out that next, the two of them would ignite their true chi flames and place their divine sense into the furnace. Xiang questioned whether this was not just an alchemy competition, so why did they have to make everything so complicated? Luzong asked his grandson to stop questioning things and just follow orders, because he talked too much. The protagonist simply stayed quiet and did exactly what his grandfather had said. As soon as he began placing the flames inside, he noticed something strange, as if he had gone to another reality and asked what that was. Some monsters appeared flying around him. Luzong explained that this was how a high-level alchemist competed using alchemy, but the protagonist was still confused because he could not see his grandfather. Luzong pointed out that they could enter with their divine senses by introducing their flames into the furnace. From now on, that competition was not only about alchemy skills, but also about controlling their flame beasts. Mengbo explained that they were medicinal bats, true chi flame beasts formed from his true chi. Xiang finally understood what was happening, and it was no wonder that place was making him remember the divine realm. Ma Yao appeared and said that, to be a little more precise, that was not the divine realm, but only a poor imitation of her master's alchemy, created through the participation of later generations of alchemists. The principles were the same, so she needed to know if he was still confident. Xiang answered without hesitation that he was, because he had already suffered a lot in a place similar to that. Mengbo said that this was probably the protagonist's first alchemy competition using divine sense, so he could give him a few pointers. First, he needed to drive away those medicinal bats. Xiang laughed and began releasing his flames, saying that actually he did not need to do that, because it was only a matter of defeating the flame beasts. He summoned Bifeng and asked it to lend him a little help. As soon as Bifeng appeared, the pressure around them increased. Mengbo was surprised and asked how much training he had undergone to create such a strong, true qi flame. So he needed to give it his all and created new bats, but Bifeng used fireballs to attack, destroying everything around it. Mengbo created a shield around himself, saying that heaven and earth could not be controlled. He summoned the medicinal bats again and used the purple lightning flash. The attack was truly very powerful, causing both the red bird and the protagonist to suffer damage. Xiang realized that the damage suffered by his beast would be transferred to its owner. In addition, he could not break through Mengbo's defense, and his bird's speed was too slow to damage those medicinal bats. Bifeng continued taking damage and tried to attack desperately. The protagonist also began to feel intense pain throughout his body, thinking that it would probably be very difficult to win if things continued like that. Mengbo pointed out that every clash between the flame beast would consume and shake his divine sense. However, the most important thing was that it could even damage his alchemy foundation, so he advised the protagonist to give up as quickly as possible. Ma Yao appeared once again and said that, from the looks of it, her disciple was a complete idiot, and questioned whether he had forgotten the first trial he had passed with Bifeng. He asked if she meant separation. Ma Yao scolded him, saying that he always bragged that bigger was better, but she smiled, saying that sometimes smaller was better and enough for the job, because being too big was sometimes not that good. Xiang asked her what he should do if that was really the case. Ma Yao explained that he should insert his true qi flame and his divine sense into Bifeng, because she would help him control all of that. Mengbo prepared to attack again, summoning his medicinal bats. He created a cage and used purple lightning contact, saying that he would end that competition immediately because he did not want to see a genius fall because of that. He gave the order for his bats to attack, but Bifeng split into 3 smaller birds, though they were extremely faster, and they began moving while attacking the bats, causing Mengbo to be affected. As soon as he received the injury, he questioned what that was. Xiang laughed, saying that the taste of bats was not so bad. He thanked his master for the reminder, because now that his beast had split into smaller forms, they could easily keep up with the speed of the medicinal bats. Bifeng split even further, creating several illusions of itself. The protagonist laughed, saying that now it was time to truly begin the competition. The battle between the birds and the bats kept becoming more and more intense. But quickly, the number of birds returned to 3 after the protagonist received a blow, and he realized that, unfortunately, he was also being affected. However, he realized that his opponent was in the same situation as him. Mengbo pointed out that he still had 5 medicinal bats. Xiang said that the attributes of his beast should be similar to the true qi of the vermilion bird, so perhaps he could try a trick. He released even more qi using the vermilion bird technique. The birds also increased the amount of energy they had in their bodies, creating several flames around them. The protagonist used infernal wind because now it was time to decide the winner with a single strike. Mengbo agreed, saying that this was the idea, and used the purple lightning bamboo split. The two collided their attacks. The force of the attacks was so strong that it burst out of that place, causing a huge explosion. Xiang received a heavy blow, and the people watching questioned what the problem was and whether the protagonist had really lost. Other people said that this was normal because his opponent was the Pill King. Mengbo returned to the normal world and said that, unfortunately, he had been affected by the final blow and had failed to refine the Qi Aura pill. The people questioned what had happened to Xiang. Other young people answered that there was no need to say it because he had also failed to refine them. The protagonist also returned to his normal consciousness and laughed, thanking everyone for waiting because he had managed to finish the work. As soon as he showed the pills, everyone was impressed, saying that the aura emitted by those pills contained no impurities. And that technique could probably only be found in the heavens. So how had he managed to make that? Xiang asked Mengbo if that also counted as a victory. Mengbo laughed, saying that the new generation was truly leading the old. He was convinced that he had truly lost the competition. And, according to the agreement, the furnace now fully belonged to the protagonist. Xiang questioned whether he was really willing to give up that treasure for real, because that was an admirable attitude. Mengbo pointed out that, over the years, he had relied too much on that furnace and neglected the basic path of alchemy. So now the furnace had an even better owner. Xiang bowed and said that he needed to make a request. He would like his senior opponent to join the Pill King Pavilion, taking the position of chief alchemist of the pavilion. Mengbo was surprised by the request, and the protagonist continued saying that the golden spiritual fruit was a symbol of the gratitude he felt for the match. Luzong pointed out that if Mengbo was truly willing to join the Pill King Pavilion, it would really be worthy of that name. Mengbo agreed and thanked them for all the kindness they had shown. The people were impressed to see that the Pill King had actually joined the pavilion. Because of that, everyone became even more excited, calling the protagonist Young Master and saying that they also wanted to join the Pill King Pavilion, even if only as workers. Xiang introduced Mengbo as the chief alchemist and pointed out that he would be the person responsible for handling matters related to recruitment. Mengbo was very happy with his new position, and especially because he could work with what he loved, surrounded by talented people. Lu Song praised his grandson, saying that, from the looks of it, he had truly made an excellent choice. Xiang told his grandfather that only children made choices, and he wanted both the person and the furnace, and from the looks of it, he had succeeded. Suddenly, one of the protagonist's subordinates went to him, saying that a carriage from Danxiang Pharmacy was outside and that they said the owner had invited him. Xiang thought that the owner was probably Hua Yueyun. At the pharmacy, she was taking a bath, saying that no man could escape her grasp, not even Xiang. 1 week later, Ma Yao was saying that the supporter behind Yueyun's Danxiang Pharmacy might be the Danxiang Taoyuan sect, one of the 8 great sects. The protagonist said that the 8 great sects were the most prestigious martial arts sects on the Chenwu continent. Each faction had countless top resources and cultivators, and it could be said that every cultivator in the mortal martial realm dreamed of joining them. So the alchemy of Danxiang Taoyuan must also be very powerful. Ma Yao said that she would teach him alchemy, but even if he wanted to go, he had to go to the extreme martial sect, the strongest sect among the 8 great sects. Xiang noticed that she was acting a little strange and went to her, asking if she was in a bad mood. She pointed at him, saying that it was because of his treasure because it was red and very hot, to the point that it tortured her yin body. Xiang held the young furnace and questioned whether it really was that influential. The size of that furnace could be changed, and after dripping blood on it, the person would be recognized as its master. Ma Yao continued acting strangely and hugged Yu Yu, saying that she could release yin qi to resist a little. So she was the one who was hurt the most, because one was hot and the other was cold. The protagonist became a little embarrassed and apologized, saying that this probably really was very difficult for her. Ma Yao smiled at him, saying that he probably still did not know how to tease her. She placed her foot on his chest and Xiang began shouting that it hurt a little. She stopped and remembered something, pointing out that he needed to keep in mind that among the 8 great sects, he had to go to the martial sect. Because of that, she needed to warn him not to be seduced by that woman. He should not look at what he should not look at, nor think about things he should not think about. Xiang was frightened by her attitude and the serious tone in her voice, and asked her not to worry because he promised that he would behave very well. However, as soon as he arrived at the pharmacy, he was impressed and asked if that was actually real. They were perfect and round. He was so impressed that he asked if there was some kind of special medicine in the Danxiang Taoyuan sect. Ma Yao scolded him, saying that she had just told him not to be seduced by that woman. The protagonist apologized, saying that he should think about alchemy, but she kept complaining. Yueyun came a little closer and, with a sweet voice, said that if the young master was so interested, then he could feel them with his own hands. She asked him to come a little closer and touch them to see what they were like. Xiang tried to restrain himself and closed his eyes, thinking that he could not fall into that woman's trap. Yueyun asked if he understood what she had just said. He said yes, because she wanted to trick him into joining the Danxiang Taoyuan sect, so if he became an inner disciple, he could also obtain rewards. Yueyun pretended not to understand and questioned why he was calling it tricks, because that was something good for both sides. The protagonist pointed out that, unfortunately for her, he had already decided to enter the martial sect. Yueyun was surprised by that and said that this was the most powerful sect, but also the most difficult to enter among the 8 sects. She questioned whether he really wanted to go because she had obviously made the path easier for him, and if he became a true disciple, she could become the mother of his child. She pointed out that she knew very well that she could not be the main wife like Miss Xue Xianxian, but she would be satisfied with being the second wife, and believed that Miss Xianxian would not object to that. Xiang said that he did not need that and moved away from her, making her fall to the floor. He looked at her with a serious gaze and said that, from the looks of it, she was very well versed in this, so he feared that there were already many high-quality juniors who had fallen for that bait. Yueyun said that, from the looks of it, the young master was truly cruel, because not only had he rejected her, but he had also implied that she was old, shameless, and not from the same generation as him. She decided to give up, saying that if he happened to change his mind, he could look for her at any time, because he knew where to find her. Xiang put his hands inside his clothes and said that he had a great treasure for her, but he would like to exchange it for some spiritual stones. Yueyun looked at a lower part and was impressed, asking what that large and immense gift was. Xiang showed a 1,000-year-old blood spiritual herb, but that was not exactly what she had been expecting. Sometime later, in the center of Wohu City, Xiang is pleased because he managed to sell the 1,000-year-old blood spirit herb for 400,000 spirit coins and can now buy more materials to cultivate new golden spirit fruits. Suddenly, he hears someone ordering everyone to make way, explaining that they are there to conduct the strength test. Upon spotting the Wohu City Martial Arts Tournament registration office, Yang remembers that registration is taking place that day and approaches to watch the evaluation. The examiner explains that each participant must strike the testing stone and that, if it reaches the color yellow or a higher level, their registration will be approved. The first candidate strikes the stone but fails to reach the required level and leaves lamenting his rejection. Soon after, a young man named Lu Tao pushes through the crowd saying that it is his turn and strikes the stone with great force, causing it to shine green. The examiner announces that Lu Tao has passed and is qualified to participate in the preliminary test, leaving the young man overjoyed. A man tells the chubby youth to get out of the way and asks why he is celebrating so much for reaching only the green level. But Lu Tao tearfully replies that he has every right to be happy since more than half of the candidates did not even manage to pass. The examiner then calls the protagonist, who promptly steps forward and observes carefully, realizing that the stone changes between red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple, according to the strength of the strike. Since the participants who are considered truly qualified all seem to reach at least the green level, the protagonist concludes that Wohu City is full of experts. As he prepares to attack, he reflects that the tournament will be far more serious than he had imagined. Xiang begins gathering his energy before the testing stone, causing a wave of heat to spread throughout the area. Alarmed, the people wonder what is happening. Curious to see what color he can achieve with his current strength, the protagonist throws a punch at the stone, which explodes completely and sends fragments flying in every direction. While everyone stares at the destruction in disbelief, Xiang remarks that the stone was far too fragile, but he quickly realizes that he should have held back his strength. Hearing all the commotion, Hua Xin arrives with his subordinates and asks who caused such an uproar, and one of them explains that the young man has just destroyed the testing stone. Hua Xin asks who is responsible but is surprised when Xiang apologizes and admits it was his fault, immediately recognizing brother Shen Xiang. Later that night, while the two are talking, Hua Xin asks whether the protagonist truly intends to participate in the Wohu City Martial Arts Tournament. He explains that the tournament is a major event held only once every 3 years and represents a great opportunity for all the young cultivators of the Southern Martial Kingdom. Xiang sees no reason to refuse, but Hua Xin reveals that, in addition to Wohu City, this year's competition is also being sponsored by the Yao family. The protagonist is surprised, and Hua Xin says that although he does not know exactly what happened between them, he has noticed that the Yao family has been trying to deal with Xiang recently. Since the tournament is already dangerous by nature and that family tends to act even more treacherously, he advises brother Shen to put his own life first. Xiang understands his concern and admits that reconciling with the Yao family will not be easy. Calling Hua Xin closer, he says that he already has a plan. After hearing the explanation, Hua Xin is shocked and asked whether he truly intends to do that. Sometime later, in a remote location, an enormous amount of energy erupts in the middle of the forest, forming streams of flames and qi around Xiang. Feeling that the moment has finally arrived, the protagonist looks at the profound Yang furnace and wonders what kind of treasure it truly is, since not even Su Meiyao has been able to fully understand its secrets. Xiang begins channeling his Azure Dragon True Qi into the furnace, causing a powerful blue energy to manifest around him. Meiyao is astonished by the intensity of that qi, while Yu Yu tells him not to stop and to continue channeling his energy. The Azure Dragon then opens its mouth and releases a colossal power that spreads throughout the surroundings, and noticing the change, he calls Meiyao and asks whether the furnace has become different. Standing before the furnace, which continues to emit an intense golden light, Yu Yu refuses to examine it, but Meiyao pushes her forward and insists that only she has a perception strong enough to discover what is inside that object. Xiang tells Meiyao not to make things difficult for Yu Yu since her yin body clearly seems too weak. Irritated at being underestimated, she changes her mind and tells him not to underestimate her. Yu Yu then says that she will do it, leaving Meiyao surprised as she asks whether she is really going to do that. Yu Yu approaches the furnace, saying that it is nothing more than a broken object and could never affect her. However, as soon as she reaches out her hand, a hot energy courses through her body, making her tremble as she admits, completely astonished, that the furnace is extremely mysterious. Seeing her reaction, Xiang comments that Yu Yu looks very cute. After resting for a while, Xiang asks what Yu Yu managed to discover about the furnace. She explains that the object possesses an extremely rigid yang aura, indicating that it may contain the fire dragon blood jade, and concludes that it is most likely a divine dragon weapon. Surprised, Jiang asks whether the furnace truly possesses such a high level, while Mayao celebrates the fact that he has found a great treasure since a divine dragon weapon should not exist in the mortal world and it would be an enormous waste to return it to that idiot who calls himself the Pill King. Furthermore, if Xiang can completely master the furnace's power, the two women's plan to recover their strength will also be able to move forward. Still bothered by the energy of the blood jade, Yu Yu says that she can no longer endure it and says that she will return to the ring first. Xiang then grabs the furnace and concludes that there are still many mysteries he will have to uncover on his own, but numerous ancient runes begin emerging from the object and spread around him. The information enters his mind directly, revealing that in ancient times, a man from the Qianhuang Mountains named Yan Longzi made a contract with a true dragon and refined the furnace using the fire dragon blood jade. Under the influence of that jade, true qi flames are able to make the alchemy process much more stable. But most importantly, the furnace also possesses a yin-yang reversal formation. Jiang realizes that the yin-yang reversal formation can accelerate the passage of time inside the furnace, making alchemy far more efficient. With that, he thinks he will be able to refine a large number of aura qi pills and quickly reach the 7th level. At that moment, Mei Yao warns that someone is following the two of them, but Xiang tells her not to worry, saying that he will handle the situation. Hearing movement among the trees, he realizes that the enemy is about to make a move and tells Ma Yao to return to the ring immediately. As soon as she enters, a blue energy arrow shoots toward him, but Xiang extends his hand and using only his energy, manages to stop it before it reaches him. The protagonist then spins the arrow and tells the person responsible to stop hiding, hurling it back with all his strength and saying that he is returning the attack to its owner. The arrow flies back with even greater force and strikes one of the pursuers directly, knocking him down in front of the other armed men. Upon seeing the number of enemies gathered there, Mei Yao is puzzled by the sudden appearance of so many people, and points out that they are all clearly after Xiang. The protagonist explains that he asked Hua Xin to spread that news on purpose, and, just as he expected, the Yao family's dogs took the bait. Yu Yu asks what the advantage of that plan is, since even after luring them all out, Xiang is still outnumbered. He explains that Ma Yao had told him that the will of the white tiger true qi must be nurtured through combat. Gathering a purple energy in his hand, Xiang adds that the Wohu City Martial Arts Tournament is approaching and that he was worried about not having enough opponents. For now, he intends to use those men to test his abilities and charges at the group without hesitation. The battle then begins and Xiang immediately demands to know who they are and who sent them, stating that if they tell the truth at that very moment, he may still spare their lives. One of the assassins tells him to stop talking nonsense and says that if they reveal everything, the Black Wind Gang will no longer be able to operate along the roads in the future. Completely unaware of the mess he just made, he asks if he did something wrong. The silence of his companions gives everything away, and Jiang quickly realizes that they all truly belong to that gang. Smiling, he says that he understands now and, intensifying his powers even further, asks them to sacrifice their lives for justice, causing one of the men to panic and warn the third leader that they have all been exposed. One of the assassins even questions whether it still makes sense to continue fighting while the leader falls into despair, wondering how Jiang figured everything out so quickly, and even suspects that there is a traitor among them. Even so, he quickly abandons that idea, remembers that Jiang is alone, and orders everyone to kill him at once. Jiang then unleashes the White Tiger Wild Flame Dance technique, causing bolts and pillars of purple energy to crash violently down across the battlefield. Some enemies notice what seems to be an opening and shout for their companions to seize the chance, but Jiang merely smiles confidently, using water to restrain them. Even so, one of them tries to keep advancing, but the protagonist strengthens his defense, creating a wave that sweeps away the enemies around him. Faced with the wave, the assassins shout for everyone to protect themselves, but Jiang intensifies the attack and unleashes the White Tiger's second move, causing an enormous tiger made of energy to appear and violently strike the group. The enemies are defeated by the attack and collapse. The third leader begins trembling and, in surprise, asks whether Xiang has already advanced to the 7th level. The protagonist thinks that, judging by the form of his true qi, he still remains at the 6th level, but after combining his power with the dragon furnace, his techniques have become even stronger. So, it is not strange for them to think that he has already reached the next realm. Xiang then directly asks whether the Yao family sent them and what their true objective is. The man claims to be the third leader of the Black Wind Gang and asks whether Xiang truly believes he has the strength to kill him, refusing to reveal anything. The protagonist once again displays his power and replies that if he does not want to tell the truth, he has several ways to force him to speak. The third leader recognizes the legendary Yin Demon True Qi and is shocked, since every technique Xiang used before was pure Yang. He tries to understand who that young man really is and how he knows a demonic power. But before he can do anything, the protagonist grabs his head and uses his power, releasing a colossal burst of energy and forcing the man to his knees as he screams in pain. Since the third leader recognized the yin demon True Chi, Xiang asks whether the Black Wind Gang has any connection to Yu Yu. She explains that she has had nothing to do with the mortal world for a very long time, and believes that the gang was probably founded by the descendants of some incompetent disciple. Still lying on the ground, the third leader tries to say something about the Pill King Pavilion, causing Xiang to grab him and ask what he just said. When the man manages to repeat the pavilion's name, Xiang immediately understands the situation and rushes back toward Wohu City at high speed. As he flies forward, he realizes that he should have anticipated this, because knowing the Yao family's treacherous nature, they would never target only him. In fact, they lured Xiang away precisely to create an opportunity to attack the Pill King Pavilion, making him worry about Luzong and the alchemists. When he arrives at the place the third leader identified as the real target, Xiang is puzzled to find no signs of destruction or battle. At that moment, Tianhu appears, saying that his son has truly grown up, and jokes that he heard rumors that Xiang spent several days in the room of the owner of Danxiang Taoyuan. Surprised to see his father there, Xiang calls out to him while Hanhai also appears and advises the young man to know how to behave, commenting that he used to be the same way in the past. Xiang then asks when Uncle Hanhai arrived and whether they encountered any cultivators trying to cause trouble. Hanhai explains that they happened to arrive at the exact moment of the attack, but the invaders could not even truly be considered cultivators, being nothing more than a group of bandits who used a few tricks and were driven back by members of the Shen family. Relieved, Xiang thanks them for their help, and Tianhu tells his son not to worry because he knows Xiang left to improve himself, and if anything happens, the entire family will be there to support him. However, soon afterward, Tianhu begins coughing up blood and collapses to the ground, causing Xiang to rush to his father's side while Hanhai shouts for his brother. Later that night, Luzong examines Tianhu and then explains that his internal energy is in chaos, causing his true qi to circulate in reverse. To save his life, he had to temporarily seal the man's meridians with his own qi. Worried, Jiang asks Uncle Hanhai whom they fought and what had happened. Hanhai explains that they faced a group of bandits whose leader was only at the 8th level, and both he and Tianhu managed to drive him back in just a few moves, leaving the opponent even more badly injured. Because of this, he believes that the enemies used some evil technique whose effects only appeared after some time. Luzong then begins using a technique and asks them to observe Tianhu's wound, wondering whether that mark might have been caused by a claw. Hearing this, Hanhai realizes that he was also struck, and when he looks at his own hand, he sees dark marks spreading through his veins, concluding in alarm that he has also been cursed. Sometime later, Tianhu and Hanhai remain lying down, still groaning in pain, but Luzong assures them that the two are out of danger for the time being. He advises Xiang to rest early and focus on preparing for the martial arts tournament, saying that he will personally take care of the Pill King Pavilion. Xiang then leaves the place in his care, and Luzong says goodbye before departing. After Luzong leaves, Xiang turns and goes outside, where he asks Yu Yu whether she recognizes the strange wound on his father's body. She explains that a caster marked Tianhu with extraction magic, a technique capable of continuously absorbing the victim's true qi and essence. If it is not interrupted, in only 3 days the marked person will have all of their energy drained and die, leaving Xiang alarmed by how little time remains. Yu Yu tells him not to worry too much, because whoever injured his father has a very poor mastery of the technique, and Luzong has already managed to temporarily seal its effects. She also comments that she does not know how many generations that magic has been passed down among useless disciples, but their current level is not even suitable for practicing demonic arts. As Ma Yao comes out of the ring, Xiang realizes that the Yao family acted with extreme cruelty, taking advantage of the fact that he needs to prepare for the martial arts tournament and would not have time to deal with both situations at once. To him, the enemies deliberately chose that moment to attack. Suddenly, Mei Yao grabs him by the neck, making him ask in alarm what she is doing. Trying to hit him, Mei Yao asks why he looks so dejected. The young man explains that the enemies used an evil technique, and she reminds him that the greatest expert in that kind of art is standing right in front of him. Xiang then asks Yu Yu whether, even without her former powers, she could help him eliminate the leader of the Black Wind Gang, but she says that she cannot do that. He tries another approach and asks whether Yu Yu can undo the technique placed on his father and Hanhai, but she explains that her evil arts are only meant to kill, not to save people. When Xiang no longer knows what to do, Mei Yao comments that she remembers a special technique her sister still possesses, making Yu Yu irritated when she realizes what she is planning. Moments later, Xiang enters a bathtub while Yu Yu, removing her clothes, asks whether she really has to do that. Mei Yao explains that, with her sister's evil technique, the young man will be protected against the Black Wind Gang. Yu Yu then begins getting into the bathtub, leaving Xiang surprised as he asks whether the technique is really that powerful, while Mei Yao says that he will be safe from that disgusting gang. The protagonist then asks what she intends to pass on to him. Yu Yu replies that naturally her skill cannot be compared to the technique used by those mediocre cultivators. Yu Yu explains that the technique being passed to Xiang will help him break through to the next level in a short period of time because it will allow him to absorb the power of his own opponents. Impressed by the ability of that art, he comments that it is truly powerful. Yu Yu then approaches, places a finger against his forehead, and begins transferring an intense demonic energy, revealing that the ability is called the Devouring Demon Technique. At that very moment, a dark aura spreads around the two of them and envelops the entire bathtub. Sometime later in the Black Wind Gang's lair, laughter echoes through the hall as one of the men mocks the Shen family, saying that they are nothing but trash for daring to oppose the Yao family. Hua Gaoyun, the leader of Wohu City, says that everything is settled now because, with the help of the Black Wind Gang's master, the head of the Shen family was gravely injured, and the Pilking Pavilion may not even be able to remain open. Wang Yishan, patriarch of the Wang family, begins insulting Xiang, but the gangmaster interrupts him, saying that the young man must already have been cut into 8 pieces since he sent 300 men to deal with the boy. At that instant, a subordinate comes flying through the hall shouting for the master. The man is the leader who attacked Xiang earlier and collapses before them, managing only to warn that someone has invaded the place. The master rises furiously and demands to know who dares cause trouble there. But Xiang appears in the middle of the hall, surrounded by the men he has already defeated, saying that he was merely passing by and decided to come in after hearing everyone talking about him. He still asks whether there is anything wrong with that, and upon recognizing the young man, the gangmaster is terrified and thinks that it is impossible because Xiang should already be dead. Ignoring his reaction, Xiang says that he has come to bring some good news. When the man asks what it is, Xiang explains that some people pretended to be disciples of the Black Wind Gang in order to attack him, but he killed them all. The master asks in disbelief whether Yang did it alone and demands to know what happened to his second son. Xiang retorts that they can use tricks against him, but they cannot endure it when he takes revenge, and advises everyone to reconsider whether they truly want to continue serving as dogs of the Yao family. Wang Yishan becomes furious, calls Xiang trash, and says that he has no authority to give orders in that place. Gathering flames around his fist, he charges forward, but Xiang dodges the attack and, with a single movement, sends the man flying while telling him to get out of there. The force of the blow sends Wang Yishan flying out of the hall, crashing through the building and landing among the rubble while coughing up blood. The master of the Black Wind Gang points out that Wang Yishan is at the 7th level, while Hua Gaoyun cannot believe that he failed to block even a single blow. Xiang then makes it clear that this is a grudge between him and the Black Wind Gang. If they want to die, he will not stop them, but if they wish to stay alive, they had better stay out of it. Hua Gaoyun quickly decides to leave, and the protagonist turns his attention back to the gangmaster, leaving the rest up to him. Furious, the man orders everyone to kill Xiang, claiming that he is alone. The gang members attack from all directions, but Xiang asks whether the old man truly understands the consequences of that order and releases an enormous wave of energy that engulfs the area and sends the enemies flying in every direction. The master is shocked by how quickly everyone is eliminated. Even so, he begins to laugh, making Xiang ask why. The man explains that he is laughing because Xiang is an extremely talented cultivator, but it is a shame that someone like him will die in that place. The master then activates his beast-like ability and transforms into a monstrous form, with an enormous body, greenish skin, and a long purple tongue, declaring that even if Xiang has reached the 7th level, he is still nothing more than a worm before him. The creature lashes its tongue at the protagonist, but Xiang manages to dodge. Realizing that his hand was struck, he comments that the transformation is just as disgusting as the man himself. Soon, the slime on his hand begins causing pain, but he simply flicks it aside, remarking that he was careless. Without hesitation, the gangmaster attacks again, promising to make Xiang's life worse than death. He tries to strike with his enormous tongue, destroying everything in its path while Xiang dodges each attack. Convinced that he is cornering the young man, the master tells him to keep running so that he can torture him for longer. But Xiang asks whether that idiot is forgetting something. Taking advantage of the tongue's enormous length, he moves around the hall and causes the attack to wrap several times around the pillars until the tongue is completely tied up. Realizing that he is trapped, the master struggles to free himself, but one of the pillars begins to crack and slowly falls toward him. After being struck, he reverts to his human form, and the protagonist takes the opportunity to move closer. Xiang seizes the opening and says that now it is his turn. Charging forward with all his strength, he uses the Heavenly Tiger Violent Killing Fist and strikes his opponent hard, making him cough up blood. Xiang even taunts him, asking whether he cannot block even that punch, before declaring that the blow is repayment for the attack on the Pill King Pavilion and for the injuries inflicted on his father and Hanhai. He promises to make the man pay for everything, but the Gangmaster gathers a powerful energy and counterattacks using the Thunder Tiger Lightning Formation. The protagonist immediately realizes that it is his father's technique, but he is struck with brutal force and sent flying backward. He manages to withstand the attack and gets back up while coughing up blood. The master of the Black Wind Gang asks whether he is curious to know how he can use his father's technique. The man then reveals that, according to legend, the first gangmaster was a disciple of the 9 heavenly demons and left behind for his successors an evil art that should already have been lost. This technique allows its user to absorb the true chi of opponents and even take their abilities for himself. As purple energy begins to leave Xiang's body, the master says that he has also been hit and asks whether he can already feel his strength disappearing and intense pain spreading throughout his body. The man then tells him not to worry because after learning his techniques, he will kill him and end his suffering. However, at that very moment, the master coughs up blood and realizes in horror that his own power is also being drained. Unable to understand what is happening, he suspects that he has not fully mastered the evil art and is suffering a backlash. Xiang then comments that he heard this technique disappeared from the martial world hundreds of years ago and considers it a great coincidence to find it there. Feeling the demonic chi emanating from the young man, the master asks whether he also knows that art. But Xiang replies that the old man is not the only one capable of using it. Releasing an even greater amount of dark energy, he announces that he will show him the true power of the devouring demon technique. The master becomes terrified and, as his power is drained away, asks how Xiang managed to master that secret ability, but before he can react, the protagonist's terrifying aura engulfs the entire area and consumes him as he screams in despair. 1 week later, during the Wohu City Martial Arts Tournament, the announcer calls all the members of Group A to take their positions in the center of the arena. Among the participants is Leng Yulan, the 15-year-old daughter of General Leng. While the announcer prepares to explain the rules of the first round, some people begin wondering where Xiang is and why he has not appeared yet. Someone explains that the previous day he single-handedly destroyed the Black Wind Gang, but another participant recalls that the gangmaster was at the 7th level and believes that both sides must have been severely injured. Since Xiang has also not been seen at the Pill King Pavilion for the past 2 days, everyone begins to imagine that he did not emerge unscathed from that battle. Hearing the comments and noticing that he still has not appeared, Leng Yulan concludes that perhaps she overestimated Xiang. The announcer begins the first round by calling Group A, and Leng Yulan stands alone in the center of the arena, telling the other participants to attack without wasting her time. Since no one dares to move, the young woman asks whether they all intend to keep standing there and decides to attack first. Yulan dashes across the arena at high speed, reaches one of her opponents, and, after dodging a punch, lands a violent kick, defeating the first one. Without slowing down, she chooses her next target and lands another kick. Watching the girls slaughter their companions, the 2 survivors realize that they will not be able to face her separately, so they decide to attack together. One of them quickly tries to approach from behind and grab her, but she dodges and says that they are all far too slow. She leaps over the other opponent, who tries to react however he can, but the young woman throws him aside as if he were nothing and tells him to get out of there. She throws him with such force that it creates a massive impact in the arena. In just a few moments, every member of the group is defeated, leaving the spectators shocked by how quickly the fight ended. Some comment that such a result was already expected from the Leng family's flowing charm technique, while others ask whether she really is General Leng's daughter and how old she is. After Leng Yulan's victory, the announcer declares her the winner of Group A, while the young woman leaves the arena complaining that all of her opponents were useless. Soon afterward, the members of Group B are called to prepare, but some participants begin questioning whether Xiang really will not appear, and one of them laments it because he entered the tournament specifically to fight him. The 5th elder of the Yao family mocks him, saying that Xiang is nothing more than a stupid brat for abandoning the tournament over a moment of anger. Receiving no response, the announcer warns that he will call Xiang's name 3 times, and if he does not appear, he will be considered defeated. The count reaches 2, but before it can continue, Xiang finally appears. He enters the arena saying that he is present, leaving everyone relieved and the 5th elder completely stunned. The protagonist explains that he was delayed on the way and asks them to repeat the rules. The announcer agrees and explains that 5 participants from the same group will fight at the same time, with the winner being the last one remaining inside the arena. Watching from afar, the fifth elder thinks that even if Xiang was lucky enough to defeat the master of the Black Wind Gang, he must certainly still be injured. Confident in his plan, he remembers that he paid the other participants a great deal of money to work together and eliminate Xiang. As soon as the announcer orders the fight to begin, all four of them charge at the same time, with the bald man warning that they will show no mercy. Xiang simply tells everyone to come at him and, condensing his qi, releases a powerful burst of energy that sends his opponents flying. One of them is frightened when he realizes that Xiang has managed to condense his qi, while the fifth elder cannot believe the power he has displayed. Xiang thinks that, after absorbing the true qi of the Black Wind Gang's master, he finally managed to advance to the 8th level. Looking at the opponents who can still stand, he asks whether they would rather leave the arena on their own or want him to do it personally. Terrified, the men immediately surrender and run out, while the crowd begins chanting Xiang's name. Watching everything, Leng Yulan realizes that her initial judgment was wrong and begins eagerly awaiting the moment when she can face him. At the end of the first round, the announcer declares that the second stage of the tournament will take place in 3 days and begins revealing the new group formations. Leng Yulan and Song Nanming, the crown prince, are placed in Group A, and Nanming immediately approaches, saying that he could never bear to hurt his future wife, so he asks the young woman to admit defeat in advance. Yulan shows no interest and tells him to stop dreaming, emphasizing that not even her father's spirit in heaven would allow her to marry someone like him. The announcer continues the draw and places Xiang and Yao Chong in Group B. Staring at his future opponent, Yao Chong says that he must defeat him and will do so by any means necessary. Xiang notices that he is different from the other members of the Yao family because, at the very least, he does not try to hide his intentions by pretending to be a gentleman. At that moment, a man appears wielding a knife and shouting that Xiang has finally dared to show his face. Without giving him any time to respond, the man charges forward, saying that the protagonist must pay for the death of his brother Tianhua. Xiang asks whether he also belongs to the Yao family. He then strikes the attacker's hand, causing the knife to slip free and spin through the air before catching it by the handle. Pointing the man's own weapon at him, Xiang warns that anyone who chooses to wield a blade must also be prepared to be wounded by one. The protagonist then charges forward, saying that he will teach him that lesson on behalf of Yao Tianhua. But before he can strike the man, Yao Chong steps in and grabs the blade with his bare hand. Xiang is surprised and immediately asks who he is. Without releasing the blade, Yao Chong replies that members of the Yao family do not need lessons from outsiders because they will handle their own problems themselves. Tianhua's brother notices the wound and tries to warn him about his hand, but Yao Chong tells him not to interfere and orders him to go back immediately. Watching everything from a distance, Song Nanming comments that he did not expect the members of the Yao family to be so stupid. Even if Yao Chong uses pills to treat the cut, that hand will hardly be completely healed within the 3 days remaining before the next round. Not caring much about the commotion, Nanming says that he will win the tournament anyway and tells Leng Yulan that they can discuss the wedding date after the fight. The young woman turns around irritably and tells him to keep dreaming. Xiang also decides to end the confrontation and tells Yao Chong that he will not argue with him this time, but makes it clear that he will show no mercy during their next encounter. Yao Chong calmly replies that he will see him again in 3 days and, licking the blood from his hand, calls out to the deceased Tianhua, promising that he will soon avenge him. Sometime later, while returning home, Xiang continues thinking about that encounter. From the very beginning, he felt that there was something very strange about Yao Chong, but he cannot identify exactly what it is. Suddenly, he senses an unusual presence and, looking ahead, sees an old man surrounded by several masked men, and concludes that people with that kind of energy probably do not belong to the mortal world since they possess powerful, true qi. Xiang approaches cautiously and directly asks whether they came from a place beyond that world. The elder ignores the question and first confirms whether the young man standing before him is Xiang. He then introduces himself as Shen Furong, explaining that he left the Shen family 50 years ago to join the martial sect and that, because of his position and seniority, he can also be considered one of the protagonist's ancestors. Xiang is left speechless when he realizes that yet another grandfather has appeared before him, but soon thinks that perhaps this is not a bad thing. After all, a large-scale confrontation with the Yao family seems inevitable, and there is a possibility that this ancestor returned specifically to help his family. Shen Furong, however, says that he came looking for him for only one reason. Believing that he will receive some guidance or support, Xiang respectfully asks the senior to freely say what he wants. At that moment, Furong slams his staff hard against the ground, releasing intense pressure all around them, and orders Xiang to immediately go apologize to the Yao family, stop causing trouble, and avoid making the situation any worse. Hearing that completely unexpected demand, the protagonist freezes and asks whether he really heard him correctly. Unable to believe it, Jiang asks Senior Shen what he is talking about. Furong explains that the Yao family helped him greatly during the years he spent in the martial sect, and because of that, he refuses to accept that Jiang has become their enemy. Before the protagonist can respond, Lu Zong appears and rebukes the old man, saying that he has no right to consider himself a member of the Shen family. After all, Xiang is the first rare talent the family has produced in thousands of years. Yet Furong is making his life difficult out of pure selfishness, without thinking about how he will answer to their ancestors. Even so, Furong says that he has already given his warning because the Yao family is far more powerful than they imagine, and if Xiang has any common sense, he should apologize for his own good. He then calls his men and leaves. Lu Zong complains that Furong is truly strange and says that he never expected him to turn against his own family after receiving a few favors from the Yao family. Xiang then asks whether all disciples of the martial sect are like that. Lu Zong explains that most of those masked men are merely outer disciples, while Shen Furong holds a slightly higher position, because the truly powerful members are the inner disciples and true disciples. Hearing this, Xiang becomes even more curious about the martial sect. Sometime later, the protagonist begins intense training, doing push-ups while supporting Mei Yao's magical weapon on his back with its weight increased. Completely exhausted, he says that he cannot continue, but Ma Yao refuses to let him stop and orders him to keep going. Xiang reaches 3,967 push-ups, while Yu Yu explains that to master beast transformation, he must first completely exhaust his own body. If it were not for Ma Yao's magical weapon, which can increase its weight by 300 pounds, it would take him much longer to reach that condition. Mei Yao warns that she will not let the brat escape unless he gives it everything he has, forcing Xiang to continue training. When he finally collapses, she says that it is enough and announces the beginning of the second stage. Ma Yao explains that Xiang must now enter his divine sense and face the creature formed by his own true qi. To do this, he needs to choose one of the 4 symbols' divine arts and imagine the desired qi taking the form of a beast. Since the white tiger true qi is his main offensive technique at the moment, Xiang decides to use it. As soon as he begins, the protagonist senses something, and a massive tiger made of purple energy soon appears before him. Mei Yao explains that if he can defeat it, he will truly master the white tiger beast transformation, and will also be able to use true qi penetration to execute even more advanced metal techniques. However, before the fight can begin, Xiang notices that another gigantic creature is also taking shape and asks why there is a second enemy, wanting to know whether it is the Xuanwu. Ma Yao simply confirms that it really is the Xuanwu, leaving the protagonist furious at how casually she answers and demanding an explanation. She says that because there are 4 types of true qi inside his body, the Xuanwu qi was probably stimulated as well. On the positive side, if he defeats both creatures, Xiang will be able to obtain 2 beast transformations at once. Frightened, he asks what will happen if he fails to defeat them, and Ma Yao reveals that the power of the true qi will take control, causing him to completely lose his own consciousness. After all, the 4 symbols' divine arts are extremely special, and the dangers of their beast transformation are far greater than those of ordinary techniques. Xiang shouts, asking why she's only telling him this now. Without giving him any room to react, the white tiger and Xuanwu charge together, terrifying the protagonist, while Ma Yao says that she believes he will succeed. As he runs desperately, Xiang accuses her of lying to him and trying to get him killed. 3 days later, on the day of the second round, the announcer officially declares the beginning of the Wohu City Martial Arts Tournament and calls all the candidates to enter the arena. He emphasizes that once again there will be no rules and that the last participant remaining on the field will be declared the winner. Before the fight begins, Xiang tosses a small pouch to Yao Chong, who catches it. The protagonist then explains that the wound left on his hand the previous day still carried Xiang's true qi, which was why it would be difficult for him to recover completely without the pill created by the protagonist himself. He tells his opponent to take it so that no one can later claim that his victory was unfair. Yao Chong accepts the medicine and, while taking it, says that he trusts Xiang's character and knows that he would never put poison in the pill. Even so, he emphasizes that he will do whatever is necessary to win. Without delay, his hand heals completely, and Xiang, releasing his power, simply smiles and tells him to begin. In the stands, some spectators question whether the Yao family has gone insane by putting someone at the 7th level against Xiang, while others lament Yao Chong's bad luck. However, someone argues that it has nothing to do with luck because everyone knows that the Yao family is conspiring with the tournament organizers. Others still suspect that Yao Chong must possess some secret technique capable of dealing with Xiang. Without waiting any longer, Chong activates the Shadow Mirage and charges forward, creating several images of himself. Xiang begins to transform and recognizes another signature technique of the Yao family, but admits that Yao Chong uses it far better than that trash Tianhua ever did. Charging forward, the protagonist decides to use that attack to test the power of his beast transformation. But before he can act, he realizes that his body is not responding. Yao Chong takes advantage of the opening and punches Xiang, saying that the blow is repayment for Tianhua's death. The force of the strike makes the protagonist cough up blood, leaving the crowd confused when they realize that he did not move to defend himself. While some question what is happening, others remember that they had already warned that there was something strange about Yao Chong. Feeling the energy circulating within his own body, Xiang detects the presence of a poisonous gas and asks whether his opponent is using it to seal his meridians and prevent him from using true qi. Yao Chong confirms it and reveals that his exclusive technique is called qi sealing. By sensing his opponent's true qi in advance, he can prepare a corresponding toxin, making the victim unable to use their energy during battle. Xiang asks when he had the opportunity to analyze his qi, but soon remembers the knife used by Tianhua's brother. Realizing the entire scheme, the protagonist concludes that Yao Chong deliberately grabbed the blade in order to discover in advance what type of true qi he possessed. While creating his clones, Yao Chong confirms it and reveals something even worse. He was the one who prepared the knife itself, as well as the plan to send that man to attack Xiang. Taking advantage of the moment, he charges forward and attacks the protagonist from all sides, saying that he knew Xiang would not kill the man, which was why he dared to intercept the weapon with his bare hand. And everything happened exactly according to his calculations. Brutally pummeling the protagonist with his attacks, he declares that he would do anything to win. Xiang is sent flying after taking several blows, and admits that he had still overestimated the Yao family because every one of them is nothing more than a shameless and despicable bastard. Yao Chong shows no remorse and charges again, this time with a blade. He asks what is wrong with that, saying that everyone who discovers his secret must die. Watching the scene, the spectators begin shouting that using that weapon is a violation of the rules, and ask whether the referee is pretending to be blind. The fifth elder of the Yao family simply calls the crowd unruly and is pleased to see that Yao Chong's plan is working. The young man moves in for the final blow, telling Xiang to die, but at the last instant, an enormous golden shell appears in front of Chong, blocking the attack and sending him flying backward. He is stunned by what he sees and cannot understand what is happening. Surrounded by the power of Zhuan Wu, Xiang stands up and asks why he looks so surprised. The protagonist explains that he managed to expel the poisonous gas using the purification technique of the Zhuanwu water true qi, because without that power, he probably would not have been able to resist the poison. He also adds that if Yao Chong is wondering why he possesses a second beast transformation, all he can say is that it happened by accident. Unable to accept what he is seeing, Yao Chong repeats that it is impossible, but Xiang clenches his fist and asks whether it is finally his turn to have some fun. Unable to react, Yao Chong repeatedly begs to surrender. Xiang accepts, saying that although he just tried to kill him, he will still spare his life, but then delivers one final blow and destroys his meridians. The fifth elder rushes to the young man's side to check his condition, and Yao Chong screams in pain when he realizes that his meridians have been completely ruined. Furious, the elder accuses Xiang of breaking the rules, demands his expulsion from the tournament, and orders the guards to arrest him. Before they can advance, Hua Yueyun intervenes and asks whether he truly intends to destroy the Yao family's reputation and all sense of fairness in the martial arts tournament with that decision. After all, if the competition becomes a joke, not even the royal family will let the matter go. Irritated by the woman's interference, the fifth elder is unable to respond, while the spectators begin mocking him, saying that both the young and old members of the Yao family are equally shameless, and that this only proves how far the family has fallen. Others even comment that it is no wonder Tianhua died at the hands of young Master Shen. Unable to favor the Yao family any further in front of everyone, the referee reluctantly announces Xiang's victory and confirms his qualification for the final round. The fifth elder threatens him, saying that the Yao family will never let any member of the Shen family escape, but Xiang asks why he thinks he spared Yao Chong. The protagonist reveals that he wants to keep him alive so that he can personally witness the destruction of his family, leaving the old man completely enraged. Sometime later, outside the arena, Hua Yueyun invites Xiang to talk inside her carriage and tells him that she has come to say goodbye. Surprised, he asks whether she is really leaving, and the woman confirms that she will return to Danxiang Taoyuan. She then teases Xiang, asking whether he is worried about losing the chance to marry her, and says that if he goes back with her right now, he can still become her servant. Xiang refuses, reminding her that he has already decided to join the extreme martial sect, although he admits that her departure is rather sudden. Yue Yun accepts his choice despite her disappointment. She comments that she has already found someone to take her place and that the cooperation with the Pill King Pavilion will continue as usual. Xiang promises to visit her at Danxiang Taoyuan when he gets the chance, but she says that men's words cannot be trusted and asks how he intends to find her, without even knowing her real name. Confused, the protagonist asks whether her name is not Hua Yue Yun, but she reveals that, according to the organization's rules, all female masters receive the same title. Just as she is about to tell him her true name, Yue Yun suddenly leans closer and kisses him, leaving Xiang completely frozen. Pulling away with a smile, she says that when he comes looking for her, he will have to work hard to discover her identity on his own. As the carriage departs, Mei Yao comments that the girl is not simple at all and says that if Xiang truly gets together with her and uses her elder sister's dual cultivation method, he could save himself more than 10 years of effort. The protagonist replies that Mei Yao's ideas are far too dangerous. At that moment, he hears the announcer declare the match between Leng Yulan and Song Nanming and runs off, saying that he arrived just in time to watch the two fight. Upon reaching the arena, he hears some spectators commenting that the prince once tried to touch Yulan in the past and ended up getting kicked in the groin, forcing him to consume many pills to recover. Others recall that General Leng was still alive back then to protect her, but now, with no one to rely on, she may not be able to escape the consequences if she confronts the prince again. Jiang ignores the rumors and focuses on the battle, where Yulan begins moving forward at an absurd speed. Mei Yao realizes that Yulan possesses dual ice and fire veins, something extremely rare. However, she laments that the young woman's techniques are far too weak to fully utilize the power of those two types of true qi. Yulan charges forward, surrounded by intense pink energy, and exchanges several blows with Song Nanming, pressuring the prince and forcing him to retreat. Mei Yao concludes that if the girl possessed a suitable technique, he would not be able to withstand even 2 moves. Realizing that he will certainly lose if the fight continues like this, Nanming decides to resort to underhanded means and tells her not to blame him for what happens next. He gathers a powerful blue energy and attacks, striking her directly. Before Yulan can do anything, the prince attacks again with a powerful kick while telling the young woman to get out of his way. Yulan begins to feel excruciating pain and, struggling to remain standing, accuses him of being a bastard for using a hidden weapon. But Nanming pretends to be innocent and asks what weapon she is talking about, challenging her to show it in front of everyone. Watching carefully, Jiang realizes that the prince used an ice needle and concludes that he truly has no shame at all. Seeing that Leng Yulan cannot remove the ice needle from her body, Song Nanming mockingly asks whether she still has not managed to pull it out and says that, in that case, he is the winner. She merely stares at him without saying a word. The announcer then declares Nanming the winner of the second round and announces that the tournament will now proceed to the grand final. Mei Yao tells Xiang to go help Yulan, and he immediately runs after the young woman. Before she can leave, the protagonist asks Miss Leng to wait and reveals that he managed to see the ice needle used by the prince, warning her that it is poisoned. As a precaution, Xiang gives her a poison-dissipating pill and Yulan thanks him before taking it from his hand. However, before she can even consume the medicine, she begins to stagger, forcing Xiang to catch her. Realizing that the poison is much stronger than he expected, he asks the young woman to go to the Pill King Pavilion and undergo a full examination. Yulan thanks him again, relieved to receive his help. Sometime later at the Pill King Pavilion, Mengbo removes the needle and explains that the poison is extremely vicious, because if it is not removed quickly, it could damage her meridians. He then reassures Yulan, saying that he has already used a high-grade core cleansing pill to eliminate the poison from her body. The young woman thanks the Pill King, while Xiang appears holding a golden spirit fruit and says that she should take that with her as well. Mengbo then leaves the two alone to talk, and Yulan looks at the fruit in surprise, asking whether it really is a golden spirit fruit and why Xiang is doing so much for her. The protagonist replies that he noticed she possesses dual ice and fire veins and believes that such a talented girl should not remain buried in a place like this. Among the 8 great sects, Yulan has an opportunity to enter the extreme martial sect, and Xiang explains that if she uses the fruit in exchange for a qualification to take the entrance test, she will certainly be accepted. Moved, Yulan grabs his clothes and calls him Big Brother Shen, saying that if he does not mind, she would like Xiang to become her brother. He immediately agrees, leaving Mei Yao exasperated by how easily he responds, and complaining that the boy is truly dense. Sometime later, they decide to eat, and while talking with her new brother, Yulan remembers that his conflicts with the Yao family have still not been resolved and offers to stay in the city to help him. Xiang tells her not to worry because the Shen family will be able to handle the situation, while her priority now should be recovering completely. In addition, he promises that during the next fight, he will personally teach the prince a lesson, Shortly afterward, the announcer declares the grand final between Xiang and Song Nanming and orders the two to step into the center of the arena. Standing before the protagonist, Nanming says that it is still not too late to surrender if he does not want to suffer. Xiang, however, retorts that it is shameful to see the prestigious royal family resorting to ice needles for sneak attacks and using such indecent methods. Irritated, the prince asks what he is talking about and tells him to stop making accusations without evidence. Nanming then releases an intense, flaming aura and announces that he will use the secret technique of the southern martial royal family, claiming that he will defeat Xiang with the dragon martial technique. Feeling the circulation of that energy, the protagonist wonders why the flow of the technique seems so similar to the azure dragon true qi. Meiyao tells him to observe carefully because that is a truly ancient technique created by a real dragon. According to her, when compared to the dragon martial technique, even the four symbols divine art seems like nothing more than an imitation. Interested in experiencing the power of that ability, Xiang decides to take the attack head-on. Song Nanming gathers all of his energy, manifests an enormous golden dragon, and charges forward using the dragon aura fist. Xiang also rushes forward and their fists collide with brutal force in the center of the arena. Nanming is terrified when he realizes that Xiang's true qi is so powerful that even his golden dragon true qi cannot suppress it. Holding back the prince's attack, Xiang comments that it is a shame to see such an ancient technique being used so poorly. He then tells Nanming to witness the true power of a dragon and releases a colossal amount of energy, causing the image of a gigantic azure dragon to appear above the arena and leaving the prince completely shocked. Without even needing to use beast transformation, Xiang says that he will face Song Nanming using only the dragon technique he has just learned, taking advantage of the battle to practice his new abilities. Seeing the azure dragon's energy rushing toward him, the prince is stunned and asks how that is possible because he believes the dragon technique can only be mastered by people like him who inherited dragon blood. Nanming insists that the royal family descends from a true dragon and tells Xiang not to blame him for what happens next. He then fires the 1,000-year ice needle, but Xiang calls the prince a bastard and releases his flames, engulfing the needle before it can reach him. The ice technique begins to melt before the flames, leaving Nanming desperate because that was a special weapon his father obtained for him, and not even a 9th-level master should have been able to resist it. Xiang then charges forward and asks whether he has lost his mind, explaining that his true qi flames can melt even 1,000-year black iron, so a simple ice needle means nothing. Since Nanming asked for it, the protagonist uses the dragon aura fist, striking the prince directly and knocking him down with a single blow. The referee declares Xiang the winner, while the spectators are terrified and comment that the power of that punch probably surpassed the 9th level. After winning the competition, Xiang asks for his true qi pill, but before he can receive the prize, someone appears in the arena and says that it will not happen. Accompanied by members of the Yao family, Furong accuses Xiang of killing Yao Tianhua and an elder of the Yao family, claiming that he has come to seek justice for them. Xiang calls Furong a traitor to the Shen family and reveals that he already knew he would appear, but demands evidence before accepting the accusations. Furong assures him that he has proof and presents a talisman, explaining that they used an ancient secret technique to gather fragments of Yao Tianhua's soul. After activating the object and ordering the soul to speak, Tianhua's soul appears screaming that Xiang was the one who killed them all and begs the patriarch to avenge them. Yao Hong, patriarch of the Yao family, asks what Xiang still has to say in the face of such evidence, but the protagonist calmly replies that he does not care and asks what the problem would be even if he really did it. Before the old man can react, Xiang uses teleportation, appears beside him, and grabs him by the neck. Yao Hong asks in alarm what he is doing, and Xiang replies that he will also allow the patriarch to speak a little more. Under the influence of his power, Yao Hong's eyes begin to glow, and Xiang asks whether the Yao family sent assassins to kill the disciples of the great families. Unable to hide the truth, the patriarch confirms that they did. When Xiang asks why, he reveals that the Shen family was growing and could threaten the Yao family. Because of this, they took advantage of the period when the young members of the great families were attending the Yao family's banquet and sent people to assassinate them. That way, the victims would believe that the Shen family was responsible and would begin holding grudges against them, exactly as the Yao family wanted. After forcing out the entire confession, Xiang turns to the crowd and asks whether everyone heard what that family had been doing. The spectators immediately begin insulting the Yao family, saying that they are even more treacherous than they imagined, as well as despicable and completely shameless. Some people are left confused, no longer knowing which of the authorities present can be trusted. Regaining control of himself, Yao Hong accuses Xiang of being scheming, saying that he killed someone and then even tried to destroy the Yao family's reputation. The patriarch promises to kill him right there, and orders all of his men to surround Xiang and attack with full force, causing the members of the Yao family to rush toward the protagonist together. However, the instant they charge forward, Tianhu appears on the battlefield and, with nothing more than the pressure of his arrival, sends several of the idiots flying. He calls Furong a traitor and asks since when someone like him has had the right to speak on behalf of the Shen family. Suddenly, more people begin arriving, knocking even more idiots away and causing the old man to fall to the ground, confused and unable to understand what is happening. In fact, it is Han Hai who has just arrived, warning that none of them will leave that place alive. Seeing his father and uncle join the fight, Xiang comments with satisfaction that they arrived at exactly the right time, while Tianhu even jokes that his son is always taking all the glory, so now he will also show that he is no useless man. Realizing that reinforcements from the Shen family have arrived, Yao Hong orders everyone to attack at once. The battle then begins with everyone attacking at the same time. Furong looks down on the group, calling them all ants and saying that he will show them what the true martial world is like. But Xiang appears behind him and immediately responds, calling out to the old man and saying that he also wants to see this so-called martial world that Furong keeps talking about. In the blink of an eye, he moves away from the area, leaving Furong behind. This infuriates the old man, who charges after him, cursing Xiang as a stinking brat and telling him not to try to run away. The fighting erupts in the middle of the forest, and without wasting any time, Furong activates the furious wolf claws and launches a violent attack toward the protagonist. But Xiang responds by raising the golden barrier to block the blow. As Furong tries to tear through the defense, he declares that the moment he breaks the barrier, he will also rip out Xiang's heart. Xiang analyzes the situation and realizes that mastery of beast transformation at the 9th level is completely different from what he saw in the 8th realm. Therefore, if he continues confronting that beast form head-on without thinking, he will eventually be placed at a disadvantage. Furong continues pressing forward until he finally manages to shatter the barrier. He then comments that it is a shame Xiang possesses so much talent because he will die there regardless. At that moment, the protagonist concludes that the 5 types of true qi within his body should only be enough to sustain 3 punches, so he decides that he needs to settle everything within those 3 strikes. Furong charges forward once again, shouting for him to die, and Xiang responds by activating the White Tiger Divine Fist. The attack sends the old man flying away and crashing into a mountain. Shocked, Furong wonders what the hell kind of technique that was. Without giving him any time to recover, Xiang continues his offensive and warns that if one punch is not enough, then he will try another. Furong begins to panic and tries to assert his status, saying that he is a member of the true martial sect, but Xiang cuts him off and humiliates him, saying that he is nothing more than an outer disciple who has not even managed to break through to the true martial realm, yet still acts as though he is the ruler of the mortal martial world. The protagonist then asks whether Furong ever imagined that the day would come when he would have to pay for constantly oppressing others, and the old man, completely cornered, can only scream that this cannot be happening. Xiang then completely destroys Furong's body, and while the old man is being annihilated, someone watches from afar, trembling. Shortly afterward, Xiang remains standing and realizes that his true qi has been completely exhausted. Seeing the protagonist in that condition, Yao Hong immediately realizes that this is the perfect opportunity. With his sword in hand, he concludes that his chance to finally kill that monster has arrived. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Yao Hong charges forward with his sword and tries to kill him from behind. However, before the blade can reach the protagonist, a powerful dragon-shaped presence descends upon the patriarch, causing the man to scream as his attack is completely interrupted. Unable to understand what happened, Xiang asks about that power, and Mei Yao explains with a laugh that it is the dragon warrior bloodline intimidation. Realizing that Yao Hong tried to attack him from behind, the protagonist stares at the old man, while Mei Yao adds that this pressure only works against people whose realm is far below his own. Unable to withstand Xiang's presence, the patriarch begins crying like a baby and begs to be spared. Sometime later, they advance toward the Yao family's mansion, and Tianhu, crushing one of the enemies, orders everyone to attack. The members of the Shen family storm the estate and confront the guards trying to stop them, while Xiang arrives flying above the area and orders everyone from the Yao family to disappear. He then throws something down in front of everyone, causing a small explosion. It is actually Furong's body, and Xiang announces that he has already defeated that old man, as well as the head of the Yao family, making it clear that anyone who wishes to stay alive should surrender immediately. Everyone is shocked to discover that Furong, a 9th-level expert of the mortal martial realm, was also defeated. With no desire to face Xiang, one of the men gives up the fight and another does the same, prompting Tianhu to complain that everyone there is nothing more than a bunch of losers. Xiang raises his hand and releases an energy slash that cuts across the estate and shatters the Yao family's plaques, declaring that from that day forward, the family will become nothing more than part of history. Furthermore, none of its members will ever be allowed to set foot in the royal city again. With the territory conquered, Tianhu calls everyone over to begin constructing the Shen family's new residence there, while the people around them celebrate, repeatedly chanting Xiang's name. 1 month later, at the new residence, the protagonist continues cultivating, feeling his body grow stronger and stronger and believing that he is close to another breakthrough. Because of this, he asks Ma Yao whether this would already be a good time to attempt reaching the 9th level, but she simply ignores him because she is eating. After a few seconds, she comments that the cakes and date paste are wonderful and celebrates finally being able to enjoy such delicacies again after so long. Xiang tells her not to worry because the Shen family's strength is becoming increasingly stable, and in the future he intends to bring all the famous pastry chefs on the continent to prepare sweets for the two of them, not just those from the southern Martial Kingdom. However, he jokes that he will not accept any complaints if she ends up getting fat. Irritated, Ma Yao pushes his hand away from the sweets, and after noticing her expression, Xiang quickly gives up, saying that she can have everything and that he will not eat anything else. At that moment, a man appears outside shouting that something has happened. Xiang immediately runs out and asks what the problem is, only to receive the news that Han Hai has been injured. Without wasting any time, he rushes to find him and asks what happened. Lu Zong explains that the injuries are not serious, but Han Hai will need to rest for some time. Tianhu then reveals that while they were transporting goods, the Shen family's men were ambushed by a group of bandits, and the entire caravan of carriages and horses was nearly wiped out. Han Hai barely managed to escape after doing everything he could to survive. Hearing this, Xiang becomes furious and demands to know who had the courage to attack the Shen family. Tianhu asks whether those responsible could be the elders of the Yao family who joined the martial sect, but Lu Zong does not believe so because if it had been them, Han Hai probably would not even have managed to escape. Furthermore, the martial sect would not be able to easily conceal an attack like that. Understanding that the enemies do not belong to the sect, Jiang clenches his fist and says that it does not matter who they are because they picked a fight with the wrong person. After defeating Furong, he believes those bandits will not be able to withstand even a single one of his blows and decides to find them personally. Xiang then releases his flaming wings while Lu Song reveals that Han Hai was attacked at 9 Points Mountain and tells him to be careful. Keeping that in mind, the protagonist departs without hesitation, determined to settle the matter. Shortly afterward, he arrives in the region like a streak of fire, and as he advances through the forest, he notices that a wave of true qi has been following him ever since he entered the mountain range. Unable to understand why that presence keeps tracking his movements, he remains alert. Suddenly, an enormous purple energy claw appears and the protagonist recognizes it as the elephant claws. More claws emerge and rapidly charge toward him, but Jiang considers them nothing more than an insignificant trick. He destroys the claws with great ease and, gathering more energy, unleashes the vermilion bird flames, creating a gigantic explosion in the forest. Recognizing both the technique and the hidden presence, the protagonist calls out to Song Nanming, making it clear that he knows very well who is behind the attack. Xiang points out that the move possessed a demonic nature and asks how the crown prince of the southern Martial Kingdom could be involved with a demonic sect, wondering whether he is not afraid of losing the royal family's trust. Song Nanming finally reveals himself, surrounded by a purple aura, and says that in that case, Xiang will simply have to die on that mountain. The protagonist then charges forward and warns him that he has no idea what he is doing, but the prince launches his demonic power against the vermilion bird flames, successfully suppressing them. At that moment, the protagonist senses something, and suddenly someone appears and tries to attack him. Jiang manages to dodge and comments that this demon seems to have completely taken control of the battlefield. Still recovering, he senses a much more powerful aura approaching and is surprised by the pressure of this new enemy, asking who he is. Without answering, the unknown man gathers energy in his hands and activates demonic imprisonment, launching several chains that chase Jiang, wrap around his body, and slam him to the ground. Song Nanming then appears laughing and celebrates that Jiang has finally been captured. The prince reveals that Jiang realized he was being lured there, but he could never have imagined the level of the expert waiting behind the scenes. Bound by the chains and unable to stand, the protagonist struggles to break free and asks what the hell kind of technique this is. The hooded man tells him to give up, explaining that demonic imprisonment is not something a cultivator like him can break. Xiang then asks whether that man was the one responsible for the previous attack and, sensing his power, wonders whether he has already reached the 10th level. The stranger confirms it, removes his hood, and introduces himself as Ju Duzi. Song Nanming mocks Xiang again, saying that he should finally understand the situation now because even after reaching the 9th level, the gap between him and a 10th level cultivator is impossible to overcome. Laughing at the trap, he says that this is what happens to anyone who dares offend the crown prince and orders Juduzi to kill Xiang immediately. However, the expert tells Nanming to shut up, and when the prince insists on giving orders, Juduzi strikes him with a brutal blow, sending blood spraying everywhere as his head is launched away. The head bounces past the protagonist, leaving him shocked by the scene. Juduzi then explains that Nanming was nothing more than bait used to lure Xiang to that place, so he has no authority whatsoever to tell him what to do. He also tells the protagonist not to worry, because he will still be very useful to his plans, which is precisely why he has no intention of killing him. Still bound by the chains, Xiang asks what Juduzi really wants, since he and Song Nanming clearly do not belong to the same group. The man replies that the prince was merely an ant used to lure him to that mountain. At first, he did not even intend to kill him, but ended up doing so because Nanming was far too noisy. As for Xiang, he plans to take him back to the 100 Poisons sect because he believes the elders will be delighted by a young man with such extraordinary talent and constitution. While listening, the protagonist begins combining the 5 elements of true qi within his body. Juduzi tells him to stop struggling uselessly, explaining that the 10,000 demon shackles are a magical weapon of the true martial realm and that even he cannot guarantee he would be able to escape from them. Xiang, however, asks whether that piece of junk really intends to keep him imprisoned and releases all of his strength, shattering the chains in a single burst. Shocked to see his prisoner break free, Juduzi asks how that is possible. Without hesitation, he uses the myriad hidden swords, creating countless blades that begin rising above Xiang. While controlling the attack, he admits that with such talent, the young man's future would be limitless if he reached the true martial realm. So he tells Xiang not to blame him for what he is about to do. The protagonist dodges the rain of swords, causing Juduzi to notice something strange. But before he can react, Xiang appears above him using the White Tiger Killing Fist. However, Duzi manages to dodge the attack, although he is astonished by its tremendous force. He then prepares to counterattack, saying that he is surprised to discover that Xiang possesses such a mysterious and powerful technique. Showing even greater interest, he praises the attack and responds by unleashing the 9 Poisons Infernal Blade Explosion, creating an enormous demonic manifestation that covers the region in poisonous energy. Xiang is struck and moments later falls amid the multicolored mist. Juduzi then warns that before handing him over to the elders, he intends to take all of his techniques and pills for himself. The protagonist tells him to come and take them if he truly wants them and charges directly at the man, but his punch has no effect at all. Believing that Xiang has reached his limit, Juduzi grabs him by the neck and asks whether he really thinks he can still hurt him with the little true qi he has left. Xiang admits that he cannot, but reveals that he has another option. His eyes take on a demonic glow and he activates the devouring demon technique, grabbing Juduzi and beginning to absorb his energy. Desperate as he feels his own power disappearing, the man demands to know what Xiang has done to him. Juduzi screams that this is the true qi he cultivated over hundreds of years and, overcome with rage, tries to kill the protagonist before losing everything. Xiang replies that unfortunately he no longer has the strength to do so and gathers an intense flame in his hand. He then announces that the fire is about to burn, releasing a gigantic explosion that engulfs Juduzi and transforms the entire region into a sea of flames. After the battle, Xiang remains among the burned trees and admits that a 10th level cultivator truly is not easy to deal with. Exhausted after absorbing such a massive amount of energy, he ends up leaning against Yu Yu, who scolds him for doing something reckless again. She reminds him that she already warned him that devouring someone far stronger than himself could cause his body to explode and kill him. Meiyao tries to calm her down, saying that despite everything, the result turned out well, and asks whether she would really have preferred to let her little brother die. Still irritated, Yu tells her sister to stop talking and help him already. Meiyao, however, notices several objects among Juduzi's remains and calls Yu Yu over to see what she found. After examining them, she identifies an inheritance pearl and a secret treasure key, celebrating that the brat has ended up finding a genuine treasure. Sometime after the battle, smoke rises between the mountains and Xiang wakes up smelling a delicious aroma and asks where that wonderful scent is coming from. When he opens his eyes, he finds Meiyao and Yu Yu sitting right beside him, each holding a piece of meat. Meiyao complains that the brat slept peacefully while she and her sister spent all that time watching over him, afraid that something might happen. After all, after devouring Juduzi's true qi, there was a risk that his meridians could begin functioning in reverse and put his life in danger. Getting up, Xiang watches the two of them eating and points out that they clearly took advantage of that time to stuff themselves with meat. Yu Yu ignores the provocation, and comments that he was lucky because both Juduzi and Song Nanming were carrying many treasures. Among the items they found were the Dragon Warrior Refining Scroll and the Martial Spirit that the prince carried with him, items that would certainly be useful to Jiang in the future. While examining the contents, the protagonist takes out a small blue sphere surrounded by mysterious energy and asks Yu Yu what it is. She explains that the object is called an inheritance pearl and that some sects store their techniques inside these spheres, allowing other people to read the information by inserting their divine sense into them. Curious, Xiang decides to test it immediately and focuses his divine sense inside the pearl. In just a few moments, a large amount of information enters his mind, allowing him to discover that the object contains an artifact refining scroll. Although he still does not know whether he will be able to use that knowledge, he considers it a very valuable discovery nonetheless. Mei Yao then approaches and asks whether there is anything else among the belongings, especially any item related to a secret treasure land. Xiang finds the question strange because he did not discover any information about such a place and wonders why she showed so much interest in it. Mei Yao then asks him to look at a small object hanging from her clothes. According to her experience, that item is probably the key to some secret treasure, but it would be completely useless as long as they did not know where the location was hidden. Seeing the key hanging against her chest, Jiang asks why she decided to place it there of all places. Ma Yao replies that the object suits her and looks good there. Besides, since she normally stays inside the ring, she does not need to worry about anyone discovering that she possesses the key. Yu Yu comments that secret treasure lands have always been extremely difficult to find, and suggests that they simply pretend the place does not even exist. Ma Yao, on the other hand, moves closer to Xiang and teasingly asks whether he wants to touch the key. However, instead of falling for her teasing, the protagonist notices a small golden pouch lying nearby and asks whether that object also belonged to Juduzi. When Ma Yao confirms it, Xiang quickly kneels down, picks up the pouch, and begins examining it carefully. After opening it and spreading out the fabric, he notices that the drawings on its surface seem to form a map, and asks Ma Yao to check whether he is seeing it correctly. Realizing that he has actually found directions to the hidden location, she praises the boy for doing a good job. A few hours later, the three follow the map along increasingly remote paths, crossing mountains until they reach an enormous valley hidden between the peaks. Looking over the entire region before them, Xiang confirms that it truly is a place filled with secret treasures. Scattered among the trees and fields are dozens of golden spirit fruits, thousands of thousand-stripe fruits, and hundreds of purple spirit fruits. Mei Yao calculates that such a vast amount of resources will be enough for the protagonist to use for a very long time. She also notices that the aura inside the valley is extremely rich, making it a perfect place for cultivation. Furthermore, absorbing Juduzi's true qi ended up being extremely beneficial for Xiang, since all that energy will help him advance even faster. Satisfied with the discovery, the protagonist decides to send a message to his father and remain cultivating in that place for some time before returning home. Before starting, however, he says that he needs to ask the two sisters for a favor since there are certain things he cannot do alone. Hearing that, Mei Yao interprets his words differently and teasingly asks whether the brat finally intends to enter the adult world. Xiang begins to deny it and quickly clarifies that he only wants to ask the two of them to harvest all the herbs and fruits in the region while he focuses on cultivating. After understanding the real reason for his request, Mei Yao becomes indignant and asks whether he truly intends to make them work in the fields. 1 week later, the protagonist continues meditating on a rock, surrounded by intense golden energy, while Mei Yao and Yu Yu spend their days gathering fruit throughout the mountains. With a basket full in her arms, Mei Yao curses Xiang and declares that he is definitely not a real man. She comments that women should be loved and well cared for, yet that boy actually had the nerve to make two great beauties work in the fields. Looking at the enormous area that still remains, she complains that half of the entire mountain is still left and asks how much longer they will have to keep harvesting. Without interrupting his cultivation, Xiang tries to calm her down, promising that once they finish, he will take the two of them to eat sweets and cakes at Yongkefang. Ma Yao simply falls silent, thinking that the offer is enough to make up for all the work. Shortly afterward, Yu Yu also appears carrying a large amount of fruit. She reminds him that only 1 week has passed and asks whether Xiang really managed to reach the 9th level after absorbing Juduzi's true qi. The young man confirms it and fully releases his power, causing the manifestations of the Azure Dragon, Vermilion Bird, White Tiger, and Zhuanwu to appear around him. Xiang reveals that he has already managed to condense all the beast forms of the 4 symbols' divine art and that, from that moment onward, he will finally be able to master all 4 beast transformations. Sometime later, Tianhu comments that the martial arts world has become too small for Xiang and that the time has finally come for his son to leave and see the world. The protagonist accepts the decision and says that he will depart, but first says goodbye to his father and uncle. Tianhu tells his son to move forward without hesitation, while Hao Hai assures him that they already possess enough strength to continue supporting the Shen family during his absence. With that, Jiang releases his flaming wings and takes to the skies, announcing that he is heading to the Tai Mo sect and asking Xianxian to wait for him. Sometime later, upon reaching the mountains where the great sects are located, the protagonist notices that the entire region possesses an extremely dense spiritual aura. He comments that it is no wonder so many cultivators want to reach that place. As he continues forward, Jiang hears a man cursing a bull-headed creature and asking how it dares act so arrogantly. Curious about the commotion, he looks down and sees the man facing the enormous monster alone. The man charges forward, shouting for the creature to take his attack, and lands a powerful punch on the beast's head. Xiang then approaches and asks whether he wants any help, but the stranger replies that he is practically finished with the fight already. Besides, he does not think it would be fair to split the spoils with someone who would only appear to land a single blow. The protagonist clarifies that he does not need to receive anything at all since he only wants to take the opportunity to test the strength of that monster. Even so, the man insists that it would not be right and offers at least one of the bull's legs as payment. At that moment, the creature lets out a terrifying roar, but he continues negotiating as if nothing is happening. Without wasting any time, the protagonist gathers energy in his fist, charges forward, and uses the White Tiger Killing Fist, striking the monster with such tremendous force that he opens a hole through the beast's body. Impressed by the overwhelming blow, the man decides not to fall behind and attacks as well. He lands another brutal punch on the monster, smashing it violently into the ground and finishing it off. After the fight, the man climbs onto the monster's body, and after tearing off one of its legs for the protagonist, introduces himself as Zhu Rong and asks the name of his new companion. Xiang praises his strength, introduces himself, and explains that he is 17 years old, so he is probably a few years younger than brother Zhu. Zhu Rong asks whether he intends to participate in the Tai Mo sect's entrance process. When Xiang confirms it, the man offers to show him the way. Once they arrive, Zhu points toward the long staircase and explains that he can take the sect's evaluation there. Since he has other matters to handle, he says goodbye, and Xiang thanks him for the help. Watching the man walk away carrying the enormous monster, the protagonist concludes that he probably already belongs to the Tai Mo sect, although he cannot determine his true cultivation level. Before entering the evaluation grounds, Ma Yao warns him that he should conceal his other attributes and display only the fire attribute during the test. She also tells Xiang not to reveal the existence of his yin-yang vein so easily. The protagonist confirms that he understands and proceeds to the evaluation. When his turn arrives, he approaches the enormous object used to measure spiritual veins and places his hand on it, releasing only fire chi. Observing the result, the elder in charge announces that Xiang possesses a fire attribute spiritual vein with a value of 75 and therefore has passed. He then asks for his name and where he comes from. Xiang introduces himself as someone from the southern Martial Kingdom, but as soon as he hears his full name, the evaluator becomes completely shocked. Without offering any explanation, the elder orders the young man to return immediately to where he came from, accusing him of committing evil deeds in the secular world and declaring that he is not welcome in the Tai Mo sect. Xiang asks what that is supposed to mean, but the man merely replies that he has already made his position clear and orders him to leave. At that moment, another disciple approaches, calls the evaluator Uncle Yao, and asks how the elder's consultation regarding a certain pill is going. Hearing the surname, Xiang finally understands why he's being rejected and asks whether the man also belongs to the Yao family. The protagonist then states that his family committed countless atrocities with malicious intentions and merely received the fate they deserved. He also asks whether the man intends to use his authority to settle a personal grudge. Yao Haisheng refuses to back down and says that regardless of what Xiang says, he is responsible for guarding the entrance, and in that place, his word is final. At that moment, several disciples approach, and one of them declares that this time, Haisheng is clearly in the wrong. He confirms that everyone has already heard about what happened in the secular world and knows that the Yao family was the one that started the conflict. Among the newcomers is Zhu Rong, who calls out to the protagonist and says that he came to see him. Xiang assures brother Zhu that everything is fine, and, turning his attention back to the evaluator, reminds him that the Tai Mo sect is considered the most powerful martial sect in the world, and therefore should act fairly. Before Haisheng can respond, a young man named Fang Liang becomes irritated and asks why that brat keeps talking about the injustices committed by his uncle, ordering Xiang to leave immediately. Yao Haisheng takes the opportunity to defend his decision, claiming that he has the authority to evaluate every aspect of a candidate. According to him, neither Xiang's mental state nor his strength meets the standards required by the Taimo sect, so there is nothing wrong with rejecting him. The protagonist looks at Fang Liang and retorts that a disciple of the sect is shouting and insulting people in front of everyone, so he imagines that man's mental state and strength must truly be exemplary. Furious at the provocation, Fang Liang says that if it were not for the sect's rules, he would tear Xiang's mouth into several pieces right there. Yao Haisheng then presents a condition, saying that if the protagonist can defeat Fang Liang within the next 5 years, he will be allowed to enter the Taimo sect directly without paying any of the fees. Xiang asks whether he is serious, and Fang Liang confirms that his uncle's word is true. With enormous confidence, he even declares that within 5 years, he will already have reached the true martial realm, so Xiang will never have any chance of defeating him in his entire life. However, instead of waiting that long, the protagonist smiles and proposes that the two settle the dispute at that very moment. Soon, they take their positions on the evaluation grounds, and Fang Liang asks whether Xiang truly intends to face him. He warns that if the young man is beaten to death or permanently crippled, he will only have himself to blame for the consequences. Xiang tells him to stop talking nonsense and warns that he will be the first to attack. Without wasting any time, the protagonist gathers flames in his hand and uses the fire palm, causing an explosion that Fang manages to dodge. Seeing that his attack failed, Xiang advances with the furious flame kick, spinning his body and attacking his opponent, but Liang manages to block the strike. Grabbing the protagonist's leg, he throws him away with great force and tells him to get lost. However, before hitting the ground, Xiang manages to regain his balance and quickly gets back to his feet. Convinced of his superiority, Liang mocks him, saying that both the speed and power of the protagonist's attacks are insufficient, and asks how someone so weak intends to threaten him. Listening carefully, Xiang realizes that he may have made a mistake by revealing only the fire attribute during the test. The main offensive techniques of the vermilion bird, True Qi, are extremely high-level abilities, and at that moment, he cannot use them freely without exposing his secrets. While the protagonist considers his options, Fang Liang begins gathering a large amount of lightning around his body and declares that Xiang has already been completely overwhelmed. Telling his opponent to prepare to die, he activates the flashing thunder spin and charges forward surrounded by an aura of electricity. The protagonist is shocked by the technique, but even so, he narrowly manages to dodge. The spectators are impressed and comment that Fang Liang possesses excellent mastery of pure lightning True Qi. In their opinion, if he maintains that pace, the young man will probably be able to reach the true martial realm within only 3 years. Facing his opponent directly, Xiang asks whether that is the power of flashing thunder, commenting that by coincidence he is already quite familiar with that kind of technique. Fang Liang becomes irritated and after missing another attack tells him not to compare his power with the trash he faced before. Determined to show the true difference between them, he announces that he will demonstrate the strength of a cultivator at the peak of the 9th level and intensifies the lightning even further. The protagonist begins to grow genuinely concerned, and without delay, Liang uses the furious thunder double rupture, striking Xiang with consecutive waves of electricity and causing a massive explosion to engulf the field. The discharge courses through the protagonist's body and knocks him to the ground, leaving him surrounded by sparks. Faced with the intensity of the attack, one of the spectators wonders how Xiang could possibly withstand Fang Liang's lightning. Zhu Rong watches seriously and comments that taking that technique head-on was a terrible choice because even if the young man does not die, the electricity could burn his brain. Seeing Xiang motionless on the ground, Liang declares that although he put up quite a bit of resistance, in the end, trash is still just trash. Looking at the protagonist lying in the crater, Liang mocks Xiang and asks how someone at his level had the courage to challenge him. One of the disciples then tells Yao Haisheng that the boy is probably already dead. However, just as everyone believes the fight is over, Xiang raises his head and calmly asks whether that was really his opponent's best move. He stands up, leaving Liang in shock, and admits that Fang Liang's pure lightning True Qi is quite powerful and possesses strength nearly equal to the 5-stage thunder. Seeing this, Liang is stunned that he can still move, but soon notices the countless scars covering the protagonist's body and demands to know where they came from. Xiang explains that in order to refine his body, he used to attract lightning directly toward himself during training. At first, the strikes hit him with such force that they were difficult to endure, but after repeating it many times, his body eventually became accustomed to them. As he prepares to continue, he concludes that he can use both Fire True Qi and Lightning True Qi at the same time, without revealing his true secrets. The protagonist then declares that the competition is not over yet and announces that he is going to enter the Taimo sect. Fang Liang becomes irritated when he realizes that Xiang also intends to use lightning and calls him trash for believing that he can defeat him with that kind of True Qi. Without wasting any time, he activates the thunder spin again and charges forward, spinning more than Counter-Strike cheaters. Xiang prepares himself and gathers lightning in his hand, waiting for his opponent to approach. When Fang Liang comes within range, the protagonist uses Stunning Inferno, Thunder Rupture, striking Liang directly and violently, sending his body flying away until he crashes unconscious onto the evaluation grounds. Frightened, Yao Haisheng shouts for his nephew while Xiang remains standing in the center of the arena. After confirming his opponent's defeat, the protagonist reminds them that he won the challenge and asks whether he can now enter the Taimo sect without paying any fees. Unable to deny the agreement made in front of everyone, Haisheng merely glares at the young man with hatred and warns that he will never forget this. A few hours later, far from there, Zhu Rong approaches in high spirits and praises Yang's strength, admitting that he never imagined he would truly manage to defeat Fang Liang. The man explains that his opponent ranked 27th among the disciples of the outer courtyard, leaving the protagonist surprised by such a high position. Xiang then asks what rank Brother Zhu holds, but he calmly replies that he is already a disciple of the inner courtyard. The protagonist becomes even more astonished and asks how someone with that appearance could belong to the inner courtyard. Zhu Rong laughs and warns that if Xiang continues judging people by their appearance, he will be forced to teach him a lesson. Realizing that he touched on a sensitive subject, Xiang quickly changes the topic and asks old Zhu whether he has heard of a young woman with dual ice and fire spiritual veins who came to take the sex test. Zhu Rong recognizes the description and asks whether he is talking about Leng Yulan, the girl who possesses heavenly veins. According to him, Yulan really intended to join the Taimo sect, but she ended up being taken away by another sect. Xiang becomes worried upon hearing that his sworn sister was taken away, but Zhu explains that the frozen wind valley was far more suitable for someone with her attributes. As the two walk, Zhu Rong begins teasing the protagonist and asks whether he is in love with Yulan, advising him not to act like a toad longing to eat swan meat. Xiang immediately denies it and clarifies that she is only his sworn sister. Zhu becomes quite excited by the answer and says that if Xue Xianxian is also Xiang's sister, then he will start considering her his own sister as well. The two continue climbing the sex stairway, and Zhu Rong calls out to an old Zhang and announces that he has brought a newcomer. He introduces Zhang to the gathered disciples and emphasizes that this is the man who just defeated Fang Liang. Everyone is surprised to learn that a newcomer defeated someone so highly ranked, and some comment that the new arrivals that year seem frighteningly strong. As they walk through the area, Zhu Rong begins explaining the organization of the Taimo sect. In total, the sect possesses 3,000 courtyards, divided among the outer courtyards, inner courtyards, elder courtyard, and the mysterious courtyard 0. The lower the number of a courtyard, the greater the strength and importance of its members. At that moment, an older drunken man approaches, carrying a gourd, and asks Zhu Rong whether Xiang is the new disciple. Zhu confirms it and introduces the protagonist, explaining that the man is Zhang Dai, the person in charge of courtyard 330, and the one who will look after him from then on. Xiang greets the man but soon asks why he was placed specifically in courtyard 330. Zhang Dai explains that the inner courtyards range from number 16 to 329, while every number after that belongs to the outer courtyards. Seeing the young man's expression, Zhu Rong adds that courtyard 330 is no ordinary place because it is the strongest outer courtyard in the entire Taimo sect. The disciples there are precisely the ones with the best chances of advancing to the inner courtyard, so he advises Yang to work hard. Understanding the situation, the protagonist looks at his new home with interest and repeats to himself that he has been sent to the most powerful of the outer courtyards. While walking through courtyard 330 beside Zhang Dai, Xiang asks whether it is very difficult to earn a place in the inner courtyard. The old man replies that it is not as simple as it seems because he reached the 10th level of the mortal martial realm 15 years ago, yet even now he has not managed to break through the next barrier. At that moment, an excited young man appears, calling out to Zhang Dai, and asks what he is doing, reminding him that the two had agreed to enter the inner courtyard together that year. Zhang tries to introduce the newcomer, but the young man interrupts and introduces himself as Yun Xiaodao. He reveals that he has already heard about Jiang and knows that the newcomer beat Fang Liang shortly after arriving at the sect. Impressed, Xiaodao praises his strength and asks whether he would be willing to exchange a few moves. Zhang Dai immediately calls the young man a bastard and asks whether he intends to bully another newcomer, but Xiaodao assures him that it will only be a friendly spar, since cultivators need to fight often in order to improve their abilities. Zhang then explains to Jiang that Yun Xiaodao is the strongest cultivator in that courtyard, and that, considering his strength, he should even hold the position of person in charge, but refuses because he finds that kind of work far too troublesome. Determined to convince him, Xiao Dao proposes that the two stop the fight as soon as anyone tells them to, and promises to give Xiang 5 true chi pills, regardless of who wins. Faced with such a good offer, the protagonist agrees to give it a try. Shortly afterward, the two take their positions on the training field, and Yun Xiao Dao warns that he will make the first move. He releases a combination of flames and electricity, surprising Xiang, who recognizes fire and lightning true chi, and concludes that his opponent probably possesses a mutated vein combining those two elements. Without giving him any time to react, Xiao Dao uses the flaming lightning chains, creating several energy chains that surround Xiang and wrap around his body. Trapped by the technique, the protagonist wonders what kind of ability it is. Believing that he has already secured victory, Xiao Dao begins laughing and tells Xiang that he has lost. Immediately afterward, he charges forward with the fire and lightning fist, concentrating both elements in his arm to strike him directly. Before the blow can reach him, Xiang gathers his power and unleashes the Azure Dragon Roar, breaking free from the chains. An enormous dragon-shaped energy surges towards Xiao Dao with tremendous force, forcing him to run in order to dodge. Realizing that the protagonist still possesses several hidden techniques, Yun praises the variety of his abilities and says that, in his opinion, Xiang already deserves to hold second place among the cultivators of that courtyard. He then charges forward again and uses the Heavenly Cloud Palm, but the protagonist manages to dodge it with relative ease. Still in midair, Xiang replies that this is a shame because he has no interest in second place. He makes it clear that he intends to take first place and counterattacks using the Azure Dragon Palm. Yun Xiaodao becomes even more excited, saying that the fight has finally started to become interesting. Their palms collide in the center of the field, releasing an enormous explosion of blue and golden energy that spreads throughout the entire area. Before they can continue, Zhang Dai shouts for the two of them to stop immediately. Xiao Dao halts his attack and asks what happened, complaining that it is a huge disappointment just when the fight was becoming fun. Instead of answering, Zhang tells the two of them to look around. Looking more carefully, they realize that the training field has been completely destroyed by their attacks, with the ground cracked and several parts of the courtyard damaged. Irritated, the old man warns that if they continue fighting, they will end up tearing the entire place apart. Even without discovering who would have won, Xiao Dao admits that the match was extremely enjoyable and invites Jiang to dinner at his expense. The protagonist thanks him, and Zhang Dai quickly announces that he will go with them as well. Later, the three meet Zhu Rong at a restaurant and sit at a table filled with food. During the meal, Zhu comments that he heard Fang Liang will probably be unable to recover for at least a year. Laughing, he warns that the Fang family will certainly come looking for Xiang to settle the score. Yun Xiaodao asks what there is to be afraid of, since Xiang managed to fight him while only at the 9th level, and once he reaches the 10th, he will simply be able to beat up everyone in that family. Zhang Dai is also pleased and comments that they now have one more person with a chance of entering the inner courtyard. At that moment, a man nearby overhears the conversation and mocks Yang for coming from the secular world while still dreaming of entering the inner courtyard. He then opens the curtain, saying that the young man does not even realize how low his level is. Hearing the provocation, Yun Xiaodao stares at the man and demands to know what he means by that. Zi Yanxi challenges Yun Xiaodao, saying that if he wants to fight, he can face him whenever he wishes. But Zhang Dai quickly calms the two of them and reminds them that any disciple involved in a private fight risks being expelled from the sect. Unfazed by the provocation, Jiang proposes a bet of 100 true qi pills to prove that he will be able to enter the inner courtyard. Z accepts without hesitation but points out that the evaluation will take place in only 2 weeks and asks whether the protagonist intends to fail the test and lose all those pills as well. Yun Xiaodao guarantees that his brother Shen will definitely pass, but considers 100 pills far too small a bet and, on his own, raises the amount to 1,000. Ji Yanxi becomes irritated with Yun, while Zhu Rong tells him not to worry, because the Yun family has more than enough money to pay. If Xiao Dao does not have all the pills, Zhu himself can sell them to him. Ji accepts the new terms and leaves, warning that within a few days, Xiang will discover the true meaning of pain. With the conflict over, Yun Xiaodao resumes talking with the protagonist and suggests that they have a few more sparring matches whenever they have time. To make him even more interested, he reveals that he has several beautiful sisters and promises to introduce them to Xiang in the future. However, the protagonist clarifies that he only wants to exchange a few moves with him and needs nothing else because he already has a fiancé. Zhang Dai asks why he did not bring the girl to the Tai Mo sect, since it is quite common for disciples to bring relatives to live there. Xiang explains that his fiancée is Shui Xianxian and that she is currently cultivating in the celestial realm of the gods. Hearing that name, everyone present is stunned, and Zhu Rong advises old Yun to cancel the bet immediately because he is starting to believe that his brother Xin's brain really was damaged by Fang Liang's lightning. After all, last time Xiang claimed that Leng Yulan was his cousin, and now he is saying that Shui Xianxian is his fiancée. Yun Xiaodao does not believe him either, and tries to reassure him, saying that he does not need to invent such an absurd excuse just because he is not interested in his sisters. 2 weeks later, the first evaluation for entering the inner courtyard finally begins. Standing before an enormous formation used to measure strength, Zhang De gathers his power and delivers a strike, causing the symbols of the test to light up. The result indicates a force of 1,800 kilograms, securing his approval. Yun Xiaodao explains that this first stage is only a strength test, and because it is fairly simple, he is curious to see whether anyone will manage to set a new record that year. He approaches the formation, gathers power in his fist and attacks with force, reaching 2,700 kilograms and also passing. Satisfied with the result, Xiao Dao steps aside to allow Xiang to make his attempt. The protagonist positions his body, gathers energy in his arm, and strikes the formation with a powerful punch. But even after the impact, no number appears. Puzzled by the silence of the test, Xiang wonders why there was no reaction, since Zhang De's and Xiao Dao's strikes caused disturbances immediately. Shortly afterward, the energy from his attack begins spreading throughout the entire formation, causing the symbols to shine intensely until the result of 4,800 kilograms appears before everyone. With that, the protagonist passes, while the surrounding disciples are shocked and wonder whether even someone from the inner courtyard would be capable of reaching such a number. Another spectator admits that he does not know, but doubts that any of them achieved such a high result on their very first attempt. Yun Xiaodao calls Xiang ruthless and complains that during their match he was clearly still hiding several techniques and much greater strength. Xiang merely reminds him that it was nothing more than a friendly spar and asks whether the second evaluation will begin immediately afterward. Yun explains that the 3 stages usually take quite a while and will be held consecutively, without any rest between them. He also warns that the second evaluation is extremely difficult since he has already failed it twice, and reveals that the person responsible for the test is the terrifying Elder Dan. Xiang repeats the name curiously, but at that very moment, a woman wearing a frightening mask appears before the candidates. She is Elder Dan, who looks over the disciples who passed the first test, confirms that they are the successful group, and orders everyone to follow her. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new content. Thank you.